Chapter 942. After the army meeting, everyone went offline. The next morning, everyone went online. It was the weekend, the perfect day for a group operation. The various guilds gathered their troops and marched out of Moonlit Night City in a grandiose manner. Even the arrogant players of Moonlit City were intimidated by these 20,000 or so elite experts. No one dared to provoke them. The Moonlit City players, who were proficient in PvP, could tell that this group of people didn't come with good intentions. Offending them wouldn't end well. Fortunately, everyone knew where these people were going. They watched them leave the city and step into the leveling area. When they looked again, they realized that they were going the wrong way. Of course, the Moonlit City players didn't know that the leveling area after level 50 was the Cloud City. They only thought about how spectacular it would be for 20,000 players to go the wrong way. Of course, the 20,000 players didn't go the wrong way. Moreover, they were walking in the shortest straight line between the 2 points. They ignored the leveling area at level 20, stepped on the leveling area at level 30, crushed the leveling area at level 40, and pushed the leveling area at level 50. Finally, they reached the leveling area at level 60. It wasn't that difficult. With such an advantage in numbers, normal mobs were nothing. They just didn't want to accidentally injure their own teammates. I think we should be on our way, right? In a certain city, the bosses of the gaming studios gathered together again. These days, they often gathered together. They looked like a family. No other guild was as close to them as they were. However, only they knew what was hidden behind this closeness. These days, everyone had already agreed that when the time came, they would personally go to Cloud City to watch the battle. After all, they had nothing better to do. On the surface, this was the case. However, in private, the gaming studios were actually moving their goods towards Cloud City. Even those that didn't have a business in Cloud City had sent people to set up stalls along the road. How many times could such a huge PvP battle happen in a game? It was rare. If they didn't take this chance, how could they live up to their reputation? Apart from this, the personal guards of the bosses also gathered at their respective locations. In Matchless Hero's words, it was likely that they would have to deal with 1,000 miles drunk themselves. That group of players was a mess, and who knew what would happen in the end? Those guys have already left Moonlit Night City for more than 2 hours. I think it's about time. Let's go, a boss suggested. Let's go. Everyone answered and took out their scrolls. Whoosh. White light flashed, and they arrived at Cloud City instantly. The scrolls were specially made at the same time. So of course, the teleportation point was also the same. Not only the bosses had arrived, but the bodyguards under each studio had also arrived and were waiting here quietly. Boss guy, where's Chun-Chi? When everyone arrived, they looked around and realized that Chun-Chi wasn't there. However, he was already online, so they hurriedly asked, "We're here." As Matchless Hero spoke, there was a flash of white light, and Chun-Chi was teleported to the same location. The bosses naturally greeted him again. Chun-Chi's status was obviously different from the others. Who has been to Cloud City before? Lead the way. Someone said. It should be this way. There really was someone who knew the way. Won't we attract too much attention with so many of us? Said one of them. Damn, even more attention is coming soon. What are we? Another person didn't seem to care. You said it's very overpowered. Will we be trampled to the ground? Another person said. Damn, don't say such discouraging words. Won't it ruin business? I sent hundreds of pieces of equipment. More than 20,000 people. How can they fight? Mobilize the whole city. When that Qianli was drunk, he taught the efficient leveling method for free in the city. I don't know how many people he won over. But my people in Cloud City haven't seen such a situation these days. The bosses chatted along the way, as if they were discussing the plot before watching a movie. Outside the city gate along the main road, they could gradually see what seemed to be dust flying in the distance. Matchless Hero suddenly felt relaxed and happy. Look over there. It's already here. Tisk tsk, Cloud City is going to be in chaos. Then you should be happy. Aren't you happy with my appearance? While chatting, the bosses began to look for a place to watch the movie. They had found the army, but where were their opponents? Very overpowered. What about Qianli's drunk? No one knew where he was. The army had successfully crossed the level 60 leveling area and crushed their way along the level 50 leveling area. On the way, they occasionally saw some players who were leveling up. The army had come from afar. Even if they wanted to cause trouble for Cloud Peak City, they would have to go to a densely populated area. It wasn't worth it to take a detour to deal with such a small team, so they didn't pay any attention to these people. As they continued to move forward, they saw 3 solo players. At first, they didn't pay much attention, but after a few glances, someone finally exclaimed, "That's the level 50 efficient leveling method, right?" After the first exclamation, everyone turned to look at the other 3. This was especially true for the guild's elite experts. This was exactly what they needed, as they had high-quality equipment. Seems like it. After a closer look, everyone was more certain. Very overpowered. Some people guessed that Qianli's drunk was a very overpowered person, so he taught their masters the level 50 method. This was very reasonable. It can't be? He knows we're coming, but he's still leveling up here? Everyone couldn't believe it. They knew that their actions would definitely be spread to Cloud City. How would very overpowered respond? This was also what they had been guessing along the way. Would he run away in fear? They guessed this possibility, but they didn't care too much. Don't forget the purpose of coming here. It was to get back at them. What if very overpowered ran away? Running away could be considered as getting back at them. They could show off in Cloud City for a while and kill anyone who didn't agree with them. When that time came, they would be on the forum headlines, which would be a lot of face. But now, 3 players who seemed to be very overpowered ignored their expedition and were leveling up normally. This result was too hard to accept. Let's go and take a look first, someone suggested. Okay. More than 20,000 people squirmed in the direction of the 3 players. As they got closer and closer, it was impossible for the 3 players not to notice. They suddenly stopped leveling up and ran away. Fuck. More than 20,000 people cursed in unison. What happened? What happened? Did they start fighting? This fuck spread far and wide. The bosses all heard it. They were still hurrying towards the direction of the dust. It wouldn't be good if they missed the show. More importantly, they gave some business instructions according to the situation. They couldn't let this rare battle go to waste. The bosses hurried forward. Finally, their line of sight wasn't just dust. They could already see the army of more than 20,000 moving. After the 3 players who seemed to be very overpowered disappeared, the army continued to advance in the leveling area. In the blink of an eye, they arrived at the leveling area of 40. The liveliness here was very different from the leveling area. Especially during the period of the new leveling method, it was overcrowded. Seeing so many people suddenly appear together, the players in the leveling area were obviously a little dumbfounded. The army finally waited for the scene they had been waiting for. They enjoyed it very much. With a command, the scolding began. Very overpowered, get out here. Only find overpowered players. Make way for the other troublemakers. The army marched into the leveling area. They weren't very polite to the overpowered players, but they were still polite to the other players. They didn't want to aggravate the conflict with all the players in Cloud City, right from the start. Although some of them thought that the strength of their 26 level 6 guilds was enough to fight against the players of a main city, no one had experienced a group battle of this scale before. Whether they could fight or not was just a guess. In the end, they decided not to start a fight right from the start. Even the players in the leveling area couldn't compare to this group of people. Moreover, the players who were paying attention to the gossip had already guessed who this group of people was. Even if they cursed in their hearts, they wouldn't stand in the limelight at this time and seek death. Moreover, they were only looking for overpowered players. They didn't attack or scold the other players. They only disturbed everyone's leveling. At this time, the bosses of the studios finally found this group of people. Unparalleled wonder felt quite happy listening to the expeditionary army's scolding of the overpowered players in the leveling area. The other bosses didn't feel much. They only felt that the show hadn't started yet, and were waiting anxiously. What do you guys think? Should we send some people over and provoke them a little? One of the bosses suggested. They wanted to be in the business of efficient leveling, so they couldn't miss this opportunity to make money from a war. With so many experts coming from afar, they felt that it would be a waste if they really only attacked 200 to 300 players. Don't panic, it's just the beginning. Let's get down to business first. Someone advised. In comparison, efficient leveling was more important. Where did all the overpowered players go? The bosses looked left and right, waiting for a good show. Over there, stop messing around. The overpowered players are over here. Suddenly someone shouted in the wilderness. It was at the edge of the leveling area. Unfortunately, he was the only one who could hear him. The level 40 training area was already packed with players, so how could anyone hear him? Tianshiming saw that this shout was useless, so he simply drew his bow and fired a sniper shot. With a bang, a player was hit. The tens of thousands of players were simply too chaotic. No one had noticed Imperial Divine Cry's arrow. And only when the arrow pierced into their heads did they realize it. They angrily turned their heads to look, only to see an expert shouting something outside the leveling area. But they couldn't see the person clearly. This guy shouted twice, but now he was cursing in the street. Apart from the few people next to him, not many people heard him. This person hurriedly sent a message in the guild channel, and sent a secret message to the guild leader. After much difficulty, everyone's gazes finally landed on the archer. Fuck, what is he shouting? There were tens of thousands of players in the leveling area, so it was impossible for them to calm down. The guy over there looked like a clown performing a pantomime. Chapter 943. Who's this guy? What's going on? It looked like he wanted to say something to them, but it was so chaotic that they couldn't hear him. The guild leaders had already ordered everyone to quiet down, but this was a leveling area. The monsters wouldn't stay quiet even if the players were quiet. Once they respawned, they would find themselves in the middle of the crowd. Of course, they would just kill randomly. The players couldn't die just for the sake of silence. They had to fight back. In the end, the voices stopped, but the sounds of battle continued. Send a few people over to take a look. The guild leaders and core members of the guilds were in the same team. This team channel was their core command channel. At this moment, someone suggested, could it be a trap? What kind of trap can there be with the support of 20,000 players? I've already sent people over. A few players ran out from the 20,000 players towards Tianshiming. Tianshiming jumped and shouted, but it was obvious that the other side didn't hear him. In the end, they only sent a few idiots towards him. Tianshiming couldn't be bothered to shout and directly shot another arrow. This attack was seen by everyone. Who would believe that this person was a friend? But this person actually dared to attack over 20,000 of them. He must be crazy. This time, someone was hit. It wasn't that Tianshiming's archery was superb. It was just that there were too many people. Even if he threw a brick into the crowd, he could still hit someone. The person who was hit was cursing his bad luck. Suddenly, he saw a ball of paper on the body of the arrow. He opened it and saw a few crooked words on it. Looking for a very overpowered person. Follow me. This person hurriedly reported the situation to the guild leader. The guild leader quickly took it out and discussed it in the command center. At the same time, a player in the level 40 training area provided them with a clue. That person is the overpowered Tianshiming. Fuck chase. Tianshiming had already turned around and was running. The guild leaders hurriedly gave the order to chase. With this shout, chaos immediately ensued. More than 20,000 people rushed forward at once, and there was a stampede. The shouts couldn't be heard by others. They hurriedly sent the message in the guild channel. The guild leaders wiped their sweat and hurriedly shouted, "Stop. Let's distribute them first." All of the guild leaders gave the order to move the teams of the various guilds. They no longer maintained the 20,000 players that seemed to be won. This was because players simply didn't have the ability to command tens of thousands of players. Most people would only be able to command a dozen or so people. The more powerful ones would be able to command 100 or so people. If the guild leader were to command 1,000 people by himself, not many people would be able to do it. This was a talent for military command. How many players could there be? Even if he found someone who could match his expertise, would he hand over the authority to command the guild? Not many of them were willing. The guild leader's goal was to command the guild from top to bottom. Now that the guild had been formed and the interesting areas were left to others, what was the guild leader's goal? Even if you don't usually give in, if you give in at a critical moment, wouldn't that make it seem like the president has no standards? Everyone knew that there was a way to solve this problem, but no one was willing to do it. Reality was very contradictory. At this moment, it looked like a battle was about to break out. They could no longer stand wherever they liked like a tourist group. All of the guild leaders gathered their people and distributed them according to the usual way of leading a team. The 20,000 players were quickly divided into 26 teams. Each of the 26 teams had their own way of splitting up. Although it was more scattered than before, it was clearly more orderly. Yu Tianshengming had already run a distance away, but the people behind him couldn't catch up. They could only stop and wait. When the other guilds saw this, they felt that it was too fucking obvious. They were waiting for them to chase. What kind of trap was this? The command center immediately began to actively discuss. Experienced people like Wind and Frost actively explained that it was very overpowered. It was possible that they would mobilize more than just a few hundred people, so they couldn't let their guard down just because they had more people. What about now? He's just one person. Should we chase him or not? We don't even dare to chase him. What a joke. Someone said. We have to chase him, but we have to do it strategically. Look at how patient he is. It's like he's afraid of leaving us behind. He's going in this direction. It looks like he's going to enter the city, right? That's right, enter the city. Someone suddenly interrupted. Look, this is their trap. If we fight in the streets of the main city, our advantage in numbers will be somewhat limited. Then, they will use their familiarity with the terrain to divide and surround us. Fuck, we'll have to enter the city sooner or later. If entering the city is also a fatal trap, I'll accept it. The guild leaders and core members were all talking at once. They couldn't come to a consensus. This was an unavoidable problem in a temporary army. Yu Tianshengming couldn't stand the loneliness of waiting, and fired another arrow. This time, the arrow was blocked by the heavy warrior. There was another ball of paper on the arrow. The warrior opened it and saw the words, "Where's the dick?" This news caused another uproar when it was relayed to the guild leaders. The cautious ones said that this was a provocation and a further lure. The hot-blooded ones wanted nothing more than to immediately lead their troops and trample this arrogant brat to death. What's with the noise? Let's sneak a few thieves over and kill this brat, a guild leader suggested. This was the first time a suggestion in the expeditionary army had been unanimously approved. Every guild leader sent an assassin to sneak in the direction of Yu Tianshengming. In the end, before they arrived, Yu Tianshengming turned around and left. Everyone was stunned. What happened? Wasn't he going to wait for them? Why did he suddenly leave? Should we chase him? Someone asked. But this was the question that everyone had been discussing all this time. If there was a conclusion, would it have come to this? Therefore, the final suggestion that was approved was, let's wait and see. As they watched, Yu Tianshengming's figure disappeared completely out of sight. All the guild leaders were speechless. The 26,000 players from the 26 guilds were also speechless. What's going on? Someone was trying to figure out why Yu Tianshengming suddenly turned around and left without waiting for them. I don't think we need to be so cautious. An impulsive guild leader expressed his dissatisfaction. Shouldn't we be cautious? Look, that brat clearly wants us to go with him. If it's not a trap, why did he ask us to go? Then why did he suddenly leave? He felt that we wouldn't fall for it, so he left. Send a scouting team into the city to investigate. The main force will wait here. All right. Once again, the proposal was unanimously approved. All the guild leaders sent scouting teams into Cloud Peak City to conduct a comprehensive investigation, to see if there were any traps, or arrangements. I say, everyone, we can't do this. I think we need a unified commander, someone suggested. The guild leaders fell silent. In fact, they had discussed this problem before, but they weren't familiar with each other and didn't know who to choose. In the end, they used the excuse of let's wait and see. Everyone wanted to come to Cloud City to see if there was a need to choose this character. Maybe it would be easy to settle everything here? In the end, just one person had caused them to be in such a mess. It was really necessary to have a unified command. If we really choose, will everyone obey unconditionally? For example, just now, if I was the commander, there would only be one word. Chase. Will you chase? We can chase, but we have to do it strategically. I'll go. The situation was special. This wasn't like Wind and Frost's team. After all, they weren't the guild leaders and usually accepted commands. But what about these people? Most of them were used to giving orders, but they weren't used to listening to others unconditionally. Moreover, they didn't know each other. Who would listen to who? If we don't choose a commander, should we clear out the team channel first? The more people there are, the more chaotic it will be. Each guild should just leave one person, someone suggested. No one objected to this suggestion. In the end, the commander team would be streamlined. Who else would be left behind? It would be the guild leader. Then let's not continue piling up like this. This is too passive. Let's take the initiative and split up a portion of the team. Then, we'll go to the leveling area. Don't worry about whether or not there are any OP players. We have to do this. Don't forget what we came here for. As for the others, I suggest splitting into 4 teams. Doesn't Cloud City have 4 gates? Let's block them all. We have to do something. Okay, that's reasonable. Everyone nodded. Just as they were about to split up, they suddenly received a message. It was from the player who had just been sent out to scout. That kid has returned. Which one? The OP one, Yutian Shenming. The scout in front was advancing towards Cloud City when he saw this Yutian Shenming return from the direction of the main city. He immediately reported to the team. What the hell? The guild leaders were confused. Kill him? Don't panic. He's floating outside now. We can kill him whenever we want. Wait for him to come back and see what he's up to. Thus, the guild leader ordered the scouts to keep an eye on this person, but not to make a move. The army of 26,000 waited quietly. Finally, they saw Yutian Shenming's figure. His movement speed was very fast. If he was placed in any of the 26 guilds, he wouldn't be bad. As expected of an expert on the leaderboard. No one moved. No one even spoke. The scene was surprisingly quiet. Yutian Shenming approached. When he saw the situation, he was a little confused. After a slight hesitation, he took down his bow and loaded an arrow. An arrow flew over. It was still the same arrow with a small ball on it. The person who picked it up quickly opened it. On the paper was written, "No more paper. Does anyone recognize me? Send me a message." The message was relayed to the guild leaders. After being stunned for a moment, the guild leaders burst into tears. Now it seemed that the whole thing had some ideas. This kid came over to say something. He didn't dare to come closer because he knew that they didn't come with good intentions. So he shouted, but it was too noisy and couldn't be heard. So he wrote on the paper and shot it over. Everyone chased after it and became suspicious. This kid probably saw through it. He wanted to explain, but when he touched his pocket, he ran out of paper. So he went back to the city to find paper. What was going on? Could they be more serious? Weren't they here to play? Chapter 944. Yutian Shenming had something to say. Everyone finally understood what he meant. The guild leaders ordered silence in the channel. Since there were no monsters to harass them, everyone shut up and the scene immediately quieted down. Yutian Shenming was only a few dozen meters away from them. He could definitely hear what they shouted. Yutian Shenming understood when he saw the enemy's formation. He immediately shouted, "The tallest clock tower in the city is waiting for you." He shouted these words 3 times in a row, and the imperial divine cry flashed with white light and disappeared. One of the guild leaders was furious. Fuck, who did it? But when he looked again, something was wrong. If someone did it, the thief in stealth should have come out. There was obviously no one there. The scout also sent back a message in time. They didn't do it. The person teleported after shouting. Although he left, the majority of the guild leaders heard his 3 sentences. The 26 guild leaders naturally started a new round of emergency discussion. The problem of the discussion made everyone cry. It was the old question of whether to enter or not. What clock tower is he talking about? What kind of place is that? Someone asked. I have a map here. Everyone, come and take a look. A meticulous guild leader specially made a map of Cloud City before the expedition. Although they shouldn't have a map of Cloud City for sale, as long as they had a workshop, it wouldn't be a problem. Cloud City was right in front of them, but the guild leaders were a little confused after the enemy made such a ruckus. The 26 gathered under the city and started to study the so-called tallest clock tower. It's here, right? The owner of the map had been looking at it for a long time. He had already pointed to the place. It's open all around here. There's no way to set up an ambush here, someone said while looking at the terrain. Yes. Moreover, this kind of open space is more beneficial for us with so many people. The surrounding streets can't form an effective blockade against us either. There are too many streets. How can they have so many elite players? Everyone spoke one after another. In the end, they came to a consensus. The location of the clock tower wasn't the kind of place to set up an ambush. There wouldn't be any tricks here. So it's still on the route to this clock tower? Everyone guessed and continued to study. Here, there, here. 26 fingers were pointing and drawing on the map, discussing the various possibilities. There were only 4 gates that one had to pass through in order to enter the city. After that, the route to any point in the main city from the 4 gates was ever-changing. Some were near, some were far, and some were about the same. How could one count them clearly? Moreover, on this map, the street entrances and the like were drawn, but the exact shape of the street was still unknown. After some discussion, the final decision was to send scouts into the city to gather information. Therefore, everyone looked back. Whether Yu Tianxinming came back or not, these 3 shouts didn't affect their decision at all. With this shout, they had a target to focus on for scouting. 26 guilds waited anxiously outside the city for news. The bosses of the major studios who had come to watch the show were waiting anxiously for their news. What they hoped for the most was to mobilize all the players in the city to fight against the enemy, but now that the enemy was at the gates of the city, no one in Cloud City was mobilizing in this regard. The players in Cloud City, at this time, only took these guys coming from afar to seek revenge as a topic of conversation. They were as curious as the bosses of the studios about how to deal with the OP. The bosses were really anxious. They even wanted to help the OP to mobilize the masses. They had already done the preparation work in this regard. It was the work of inciting the masses, which was also their strength. While the 26 guild leaders were discussing nervously, the bosses were not idle either. This show was too confusing, and it was really sad. Seeing that the expeditionary army was suspicious and did not dare to enter the city, the bosses really wanted to inform them. The city was calm, unbelievably calm, and very OP seemed to be unprepared at all. At this moment, the 26 guild leaders sent out scouts, but the bosses also sent out their subordinates. But the place they sent people to was very clear. It was the clock tower. They already knew about Yu Tianxinming's shouts just now. What was so mysterious about this place? The bosses were also very curious. After all, the people of the studios were more permeable, and it was faster to do this kind of work. They didn't need to put on makeup or sneak. They just strolled around like ordinary people. The people of the bosses near the clock tower all went there. It was normal, extremely normal. It was the same as usual in this area today. Then, a subordinate who studied further reported. There were people on the clock tower, and they seemed to be very OP. What were they doing? While the bosses were still very curious about this question, the 26 armies had already begun to move. After all, their scouts were not slow, and they were rich in experience, so they quickly determined that there was no ambush after entering the city. Although the 26 guild leaders still had doubts, it was indeed a bit useless to keep squatting at the city gate. They immediately ordered to enter the city together. 26 guilds, more than 26,000 people, squeezing into one gate at a time would also take some time. And the 26 guild leaders were very modest about which guild would go first. In the end, they decided to mix the teams, and then they started to enter the city. Once they entered the city, the entire road was filled with their people, and the players of Cloud City could only retreat to the sides. This mutual hostility was more or less unavoidable, but the hostility of the players of Cloud City stopped at their gazes, and the hostility of the 26 guilds stopped at their secret vigilance. The army advanced all the way, so smoothly that the guild leaders were a bit confused. This was very OP. Was there no preparation at all? No ambush at all? Why did they invite them to some clock tower? What were they trying to do? To start a bloody battle at that place? But in that case, wouldn't it be better to directly go outside the city? At this time, the scouts had already gone to the clock tower and carefully studied the surrounding area. And there was indeed no ambush. The 26 guild leaders even had some doubts that the people were all in the houses. But to ambush them with more than 20,000 people, how many houses would it take to hide them? They couldn't be sure about the people, but it was impossible to have so many houses. Even if it was the city district that was awarded to the guild from the city war, that property wasn't freely used by the guild players. At this time, the scout in front suddenly reported that there was a banner hanging on the clock tower. What banner? Welcome to the guild leaders of the main cities for your guidance, the scout reported. The 26 guild leaders were speechless in the channel. What was this situation? At the same time, the bosses of the studios also received this news, and they were also full of suspicion. But they were still outside the city and couldn't enter for the time being. It was a team of 26,000 people entering the city. It was quite large, and the boss tour group was delayed outside the city. What are these guys doing? Many of the guild leaders were worried. We've checked all around, there's no problem at all. What can a small clock tower do? With so many of us, we can even push it down. Forward. I want to see what kind of tricks these guys are playing today, a guild leader said in an imposing manner. After hearing this, the other guild leaders felt that it was reasonable, so they ordered the team to advance. After a moment, the vanguard team had reached the area around the clock tower, but they didn't act rashly, waiting for the follow-up team to advance together. There were more than 20,000 people, and although the area around the clock tower was spacious, it wasn't enough for all of them to stand together. In the end, the ones who could advance were naturally the guild leaders and the elite brains. Everyone circled the clock tower twice, but they couldn't see anything. They saw that the large banner went straight down from the top of the clock tower, and at this time it was fluttering in the wind, so much so that the words on it couldn't be seen clearly. Clearly, the other party didn't put much effort into this banner. There wasn't anything heavy at the bottom, and yet it could be swept up by the wind like this. Everyone looked at each other, then at the dark stone door of the clock tower in front of them. What was hidden inside? Let's find a few heavy-armored warriors to go in and take a look, a guild leader suggested. Everyone nodded. This scouting was different from before. The probability of danger was very high, and if they sent a thief, they might be instantly killed in a wave of attacks. The heavy-armored warriors could withstand any kind of attack, and then stand behind 2 rows of priests to heal them. After understanding the situation, they would retreat, and there wouldn't be any major problems. Archer mages, pay attention to the high ground. The guild leaders noticed that there were windows on every floor of the clock tower, and they couldn't be sure what kind of attack was coming from there. The heavy-armored warriors in charge of scouting had already stepped forward, and they all volunteered. In the end, 4 were chosen, and each of them had high HP and thick skin. And they were all the elites of their respective guilds. At this time, showing their faces in front of 26,000 people. These 4 brothers weren't nervous at all. They were all quite proud, and very wickedly hoped that after they were attacked, the other 3 would die, and only they would survive. Wouldn't that make them even more awesome? The 4 warriors each asked for their guild leader's instructions, and after exchanging glances, they raised their shields to protect their heads and entered the clock tower. The huge venue suddenly quieted down. Was it a demon or a ghost that entered through this door? Everyone was sweating, quietly watching these 4 strongest brothers step in with their shields up. In that instant, the priests had already started healing, regardless of whether they saw the attack or not. As expected, the 4 warriors who entered the bell tower immediately heard the commotion. However, they were already mentally prepared. With the priests already at work, They believed that they could withstand any attack in the game. Therefore, they calmly raised their heads and looked toward the direction where the commotion was coming from. There was a loud bang, accompanied by flying dust and gravel. The players standing in front of the clock tower saw a round shield roll out of the dust, and the priests had long since lost their target of healing. The dust dissipated quickly, and the entrance of the clock tower was blocked by a pile of rocks. Under the pile of rocks, a stubborn, unyielding hand struggled to reach out. The priests were stunned, and one of them waved his staff, as if trying to help the hand. Suddenly, a white light flashed, and the hand disappeared. There was another bang, and the pile of rocks sank, instantly filling up the empty space left by the warriors who had been killed. Chapter 945. The 26 guild leaders were all standing in the best viewing position in front of the clock tower. They had seen the entire process in detail, but they were all tongue-tied, unable to speak for a long time. It wasn't until the dust had completely settled that the priests standing a little further in front of their guild leaders turned around and stared blankly at them. Only then did the guild leaders regain their senses. "Fuck, what happened?" A guild leader was the first to shout. He had already received the news that the warrior he sent out was dead. This guild leader didn't hide anything. The warrior he sent out was their guild's top tank. He was known to never know what instant kill was, but in the end, he was buried under a pile of rubble. It seemed like he had been instantly killed. Was it done by someone or something? A guild leader was still confused. "Of course. It must be those guys doing," someone said. "Does being stoned to death count as PK points?" "Fuck, I've never tried it before." The guild leaders had a good viewing angle, so they could see everything clearly. However, it wasn't just the 26 of them who were discussing this. Those who saw and heard were all discussing it. The area around the clock tower was buzzing. Not long after, there were rumors that the clock tower was going to collapse and everyone in the plaza was going to be buried, making everyone anxious. The guild leaders were busy comforting the crowd in the chat, telling everyone that their brothers who went in to check were ambushed by the enemy. At the same time, they were urgently discussing the situation. "He's dead, and the tower is blocked. Their people might be up there, but we can't go up. How many people can this clock tower hold?" Someone looked up. The clock tower of Cloud City was extremely tall. It was said that standing at the top was like standing in the clouds. Of course, this was an exaggeration. It was just that the height of the clock tower made people feel exceptionally close to the clouds. Although the game was a fantasy, it wasn't easy to build a clock tower that pierced through the clouds in a normal city. After gauging the height, the guild leaders all felt that this clock tower was really tall. It was so tall that they couldn't tell how many people it could hold. "Let's go take a look at those rocks," a guild leader suggested. "Could it be a trap?" Someone continued to look up. Along the way up the clock tower, there were many openings. It seemed that one could casually throw a rock like this out. If one were to really throw it out. The man looked back at the crowd around him and shuddered. That would really be a tragedy. It's better to be careful. Thinking back to the 4 brothers who had been buried alive, in terms of survivability and defense, they wouldn't be any weaker in this parallel world. Yet they all ended up like this. Wouldn't those weak mages, bandits, and the like die with a single hit? These fellows, don't tell me they want to defend this place and drag it out with us? Suddenly, the guild leader realized something. Damn, that seems a little troublesome. The president walked around the clock tower. There was indeed only one entrance, and the lowest window was more than 10 meters high. Without tools, it was impossible to climb up. Even if there were tools, the window was easier to guard than the door. You could climb up with a ladder and have someone push it. In any case, send someone to get some tools first. Everyone else continued to observe. The guild leaders decided after a discussion. However, they weren't familiar with Cloud City. If they wanted to climb up the clock tower from the window, they would have to use large tools like ladders. These things couldn't be stored in a pocket or mailbox, so they could only solve it on the spot. Thus, some of them went to ask if there were any workshops in Cloud City that could do this, while others went outside the city to prepare their own ladders. The people from the 26 guilds gathered here, filling up the plaza and streets of this place. Even if the players of Cloud City wanted to watch the show, they couldn't squeeze in. The bosses of the studios who came from afar to watch the show were also in a tragedy. They couldn't even get close to the clock tower. They were all walking around outside, completely unaware of what was happening inside. Guild leader, I'll go take a look. Just as the guild leaders were hesitating about what to do next, quite a few people from the various guilds volunteered to take up the task. These were the more impatient fellows. They had been waiting outside the city, but now that they had entered the city, they were waiting again. They were so impatient that they decided to muster up their courage and go take a look. The guild leaders only felt that it was dangerous, so they were too embarrassed to give this order. Of course, it couldn't be better if there were people volunteering. They immediately agreed. Then, when they went back, everyone agreed. Suddenly, dozens of people squeezed out from the various guilds. Not so many. If there are so many of us going up, one stone will smash a whole group to death. It's best if there are only a few of us going up. At least there will be a place to hide, right? A guild leader hurriedly said. Everyone agreed, so this time, they didn't choose strong people, only fast ones. Suddenly, an idea popped into his head. The tower was completely blocked, and the window above was so high up. Even an anti-stealth skill wouldn't be able to cover such a large area. He could just use a thief to sneak in and study it. What was there to worry about? Thus this time they finally chose 4 thieves. They immediately went into stealth and quietly touched the entrance that was buried by the stone. They looked left and right, nodded in unison and reported back. It's a stone. Nonsense, it can't be a hidden weapon. A guild leader rolled his eyes. Touch it. The 4 brothers discussed among themselves. Touch it. One of them said firmly. Touching it was dangerous, because if they touched it, they would be exposed. After the 4 thieves reported this fearless action to their leader, the leader took it very seriously. He hurriedly mobilized the archers and other long-range attackers, pointing at the 3 upper windows at the entrance. Keep a close eye on it. If there's any movement, immediately attack. Understood. The attackers were ready to attack. After the 4 thieves received the order to start looting, the team counted 1, 2, 3, and stretched out their hands. As soon as their hands touched the stone, the thief's figure immediately appeared. Some of the long-range attackers couldn't hold back anymore, regardless of whether there was any movement at the window or not, and immediately opened fire. When someone started, the others immediately thought that their eyesight was bad, and they didn't see anything, so they hurriedly followed. In an instant, arrows flew like rain, and flames soared into the sky. The attacks were like a rainbow, directly crossing over the 3 windows. Everyone was instantly confused. They couldn't see what was happening at the window because the attacks were too dense and completely blocked. At this time, the 4 thieves had also safely touched the stone. They tried to move it, but the stone was stuck too tightly, and the 4 of them could only shake it a little. While the 4 of them were busy, they were also paying attention to the sky above them. In just a second, they saw many arrows hit the frame of the window and fell down. Along with the arrows were sparks and sparks from the collision of the Magi's fire magic. There were also sporadic ice shards and lightning sparks. It was a unique skill of some Magi. Where would they fall? Weren't they the 4 brothers? The 4 saw that the attack was so fierce, and if they didn't run, they would be buried by the arrows. They immediately hugged their heads and ran back. The arrows fell, and indeed in an instant, the pile of stones was covered with a layer of stone. The guild leaders looked at each other, feeling that this was a bit too much. The guild leaders all shouted in the guild channel to stop, and the attacks gradually stopped. The group of archers really didn't save their arrows at all, and there was a pile of arrows at the bottom of the clock tower. What's the situation? The guild leaders were now interrogating the 4 thieves. Nothing much, just ordinary stones. They're piled up there now, and it might take some effort to move them away. The thief explained. It's not a big deal to move them away, but the key is, will the people inside continue to throw them down after we move them away? The second thief said. How many of these stones can be placed in this clock tower? The third thief said. Everyone looked up at the same time. This question seemed to be a bit similar to the previous question, but the people were replaced with stones. The clock tower was so tall, so tall. No matter how many people or stones it could hold, it couldn't be estimated. Everyone thought in their hearts. Just as they were discussing the next step, someone suddenly shouted, "There's someone!" The guild leaders didn't have time to look up at this legendary person before they saw the rainbow bridge being built together again. But this time, it was even more explosive than the last time. Last time, at least many windows were attacked, but this time, it was concentrated in one place. Then the window will be blocked. Anyone who saw this scene would inevitably have such a thought. Looking at the long and thick long-range attack that everyone had gathered together, the guild leaders could not help but shed silent tears. How was this an attack? This was clearly adding to the blockage. Look at the falling arrows. The stones had buried the entrance of the clock tower, and now the arrows were going to bury the pile of stones. The guild leaders shouted again, and in the end they repeatedly warned, "Fire only when you hear the order, don't be so proactive." The attack stopped again and the window was silent. The legendary person still hadn't been seen, and they didn't know if he was dead or not. But from the situation reported by the guild leaders, it was obvious that he wasn't, because no one had PK points. Don't attack without orders. This order was repeated by all the guild leaders. They wanted to see what the other party was going to do. The guild leaders had already found the brother who shouted, "There's someone," just now to confirm that he wasn't seeing things, and that someone had really appeared at the window just now. "It's here again." With a shout, everyone looked up and saw a figure appear at a certain window. Compared to the last time, the window had changed again. The guild leaders reminded again in the channel, "Don't fire first," while thinking to themselves, "Is this a fucking game of whack-a-mole or what? There's even a change in the hole?" The windows of the clock tower were all made of stone, and there were no windows. This person stepped on the windowsill, drilled half of his body out, and looked around from above. His hand reached out from behind, grabbed something, and brought it in front of him. The people below the clock tower were all shocked, thinking that it was some kind of lethal weapon. The archer's hands twitched, and they almost released another arrow. At this time, it was clear that he was worthy of being a guild leader. After all, he was calmer than the average person, and they didn't even bother to see what the guy took out. That thing was just a paper trumpet, but it was a little exaggerated. At this time, the person brought the paper trumpet to his mouth as if there was no one else around, and shouted to the people below the clock tower, "All of you, quiet down and listen to me." It was just a paper trumpet. It could produce sound, but it couldn't be amplified. Compared to the noise made by more than 20,000 people, it was weak, too weak. But it was still the guild leaders. When they saw the person take out this thing, they knew that he was about to speak, and they hurriedly got everyone to quiet down. Chapter 946. The guild leaders' orders weren't slow. There were more than 20,000 people, and it didn't take long for the noise to stop. At least, it was quiet within the guild leaders' hearing range. The 26 guild leaders raised their heads to listen to what that guy was going to say. And in the end, they all burst into tears. What did that guy say before? They didn't hear it, but that person actually didn't wait for them to quiet down before repeating himself. At this time, he was already talking to the next chapter, completely ignoring that they were talking to themselves. This was too irresponsible. At this time, when everyone heard the second chapter, they were all stunned. He was actually scolding them by name. "Ing Fei Chao. You bastard, you almost shot me to death. Why are you still hiding? Do you think that I can't see you if you hide in the crowd? Look at that stupid hat of yours. It's the ugliest among the 20,000 people. You're still picking it up. Why are you picking it up? Your hairstyle is even uglier than your hat." The 25 guild leaders were at a loss. One of them, however, had a surprised look on his face. He turned around to look at the archer camp behind him. A player's face was green, and he was being watched by a bunch of people around him. At this moment he was holding his hat in his hand, and his hair was messy like weeds. It was indeed an ugly sight. What's going on? The guild leaders were at a loss. The contempt from the clock tower didn't stop. The archer couldn't take it anymore and suddenly jumped out, pointing at the window, and started to retaliate. "Fuck you, damn drunkard, rotten drunkard, broken drunkard. You drank so much so early in the morning? You're cursing in front of more than 20,000 people. Do you have any manners? If you have the guts, stand there and don't move. I'll shoot an arrow at you and nail you to the wall. Fuck, why did you come out? Why did you come out? To let more than 20,000 people admire your disgusting hairstyle? Sorry, brothers below, please move aside. I'm going to vomit. There was no one below the window, but hearing this guy's yelling, the guild leaders standing a few meters away couldn't help but have the urge to retreat. Everyone looked at the archer who was scolded, and his guild leader had to introduce him to the other 25 guild leaders. Ing Fei Chao, our guild's #1 archer. Then this is... Sorry, I know him, old friend. The embarrassed Ing Fei Chao had to explain to the guild leaders. All the guild leaders were stunned. They were not surprised by this answer, but this answer made them suddenly realize a problem. Before he could think further, Ing Fei Chao had already waved at the archers behind him with a flushed face. Brothers, follow me. Let's shoot down this bastard and rid the world of a scourge. The archers were still in a daze, and the president had repeatedly emphasized that they were not allowed to attack without their orders, so not many people responded to Flying Eagle's shout. However, he didn't bother about it. He turned around and knocked an arrow. However, the guy at the window seemed to have expected this. He shrank his body and dodged the attack. Flying Herb was so angry that he stomped his feet. The other archers didn't know if they should shoot or not, so they all asked the guild master for instructions. The guild master was also thinking about a very deep question, so he didn't have time to reply. In the end, the guy at the window dodged the arrow and returned. He pointed at Flying Herb and said, Flying Herb, stand aside. East Wind Arrow, come out here. It's been a long time since you've shown your ability. How dare you plot against me? What? Do you want to silence me? It was quiet below, but this time, it was one of the 26 guild leaders who turned around to take a look. Sure enough, there was a person in his guild's archer team who had his head down gloomily as he was watched by his brothers around him. It was another person who had been singled out. Come out quickly. What are you hiding? I know it's you. Who else would carve their name on an arrow? If you want to hide, grow your IQ. Can't you change your arrow? Do you really think that you can kill me with just one arrow? I'll stand here and let you shoot. Let's see if you can kill me with one more arrow. The East Wind Arrow, who was called out, suddenly jumped out of his team. He really pulled his bow and released an arrow. He knew that this arrow wouldn't be able to kill someone in one shot. He didn't shoot an arrow, but rather, he shot out his resentment. After releasing this ruthless arrow, East Wind Arrow let out a long breath. He didn't care whether he hit the target or not. On the other hand, the other guild masters were already looking at East Wind Arrow's guild master. This time, before the guild master could speak, another guild master, who was also an archer, said, East Wind Arrow, one of the top 10 archers. He's a great expert. The guild masters looked at each other. They suddenly realized that what they were worried about seemed to be happening bit by bit. They came in a hurry and only cared about getting back their pride. They felt that their powerful army would solve all problems wherever they went. They actually didn't think too much about their opponents. This was because they felt that it was completely unnecessary. Even if they thought about it, most of them were thinking about the terrifying Qianli's Drunken. Under the glory of Qianli's Drunken, they more or less ignored the other extremely powerful experts. Even if they thought about these experts, they would still compare their strength with Qianli's Drunken. They only thought about it from the perspective of combat, but they neglected the fact that this extremely powerful group of experts had an even more terrifying power than Qianli's Drunken in such a large-scale group battle. Connections. That's right, connections. In a group battle, it was always about who could call more people. Who could call more people. Naturally, it was people who had a lot of friends. So, even though some people's individual strength wasn't that great, they were still outstanding because they had enough friends. 26 guilds, more than 20,000 people. They obviously had enough people. It was impossible for anyone to call so many people on their own. However, at this moment, after being scolded by their opponents, the guild leaders finally realized this serious problem. In this group fight, who could compare with these extremely heaven-defying experts in terms of connections? Sword Demon, unscathed in battle, Yu Shenming, brother Yu. Which one of them wasn't a famous figure in the game? These people had experience, they had strength, and they definitely didn't lack connections. The guy standing at the window cursing wasn't a thief, a warrior, an archer, or a knight. He was a cleric, the cleric that had just been scolded by Soaring Grass for being a drunkard. Who was this person? How could anyone with a bit of experience in the game not know this? If you didn't know, it meant that you didn't have any experience in the game. Soaring Grass and Dongfang Jian were both core experts in their respective guilds. They were the kind of experts who would definitely have a few supporters if they left their guilds. At this moment, the other party had already pointed out their names, and Flying Herb had already admitted that they were old friends. Although the two of them had displayed an attitude of disregard for each other, in the eyes of the guild leaders, this was much scarier than greeting each other and exchanging pleasantries. This was because their impoliteness was clearly established on the basis of their solid relationship. Only the best of friends could mock and kill each other without affecting their relationship. Soaring Grass and Dongfang Jian were friends, and they weren't normal friends either. But if they knew that their opponents were their friends, why didn't they say so earlier? Could it be that they were doing this on purpose, preparing to betray them before the battle? Of the 26 guild masters, 24 of them were already suspiciously sizing up Soaring Grass and Dongfang Jian. However, both of the guild leaders shook their heads. Even if Soaring Grass and Dongfang Jian were old friends, their relationship with these two wasn't shallow either. Everyone had been fighting together not long after they entered the parallel world, and they had been hanging out together until now. Towards friends, no matter if it was saying that the new was better than the old, or that they liked the new and hated the old, one side would always feel disappointed. The two of them felt that Soaring Grass and Dongfang Jian wouldn't do something like betraying them in front of the battle. But they still followed their guild to attack their old friends. Weren't they afraid that their old friends would feel disappointed? Or perhaps, they didn't care about this at all? Now that he thought about it, the guy who was cursing from the window of the clock tower looked down on Infandle's hat and hairstyle, mocked the Eastern arrow and the name carved on the arrow, but didn't mention a word about them disregarding their friendship and coming from afar to attack them. In just a short while, one more of the 26 guild masters had an ugly expression on their faces. This was because the guy standing at the window scolded another person. This time, it wasn't an archer but a mage. Naturally, the scolding was aimed at those insignificant places. However, the mage's degree of grievance was much more serious than Soaring Grass and Dongfang Jian. This was because the window that Han family young master was standing at was outside of the mage's attack range. The archer could still release arrows to vent, but the mage could only stare. Young Master Han's voice didn't reach a particularly large area of effect. However, the key point was that every one of the players he spoke of was a core member of their respective guilds. Naturally, these people stood at the forefront of the battle. Their guild leaders were in the best viewing seats, while they were only in the secondary seats. Hence, every one of them heard his words very clearly. Once a name was called out, there was no way to hide it. Of course, the brothers in their own guilds knew who they were, and once they were called out, they would be surrounded. Seeing that there were already people from 6 guilds who were called out, the guild masters were anxious, but they didn't know how to deal with this matter. The 6 brothers who were called out seemed to be angrily scolding the guys above, but people who understood what was going on knew that it was just a challenge between friends, and not real anger at all. At this time, the guild masters just didn't know what the other party's intention was. The 6 guild masters who were called out were thinking about how to talk to the 6 experts who were called out, while the other 20 guild masters were anxious at this time. Usually they despised the number of famous experts in their guild, but at this time, they were afraid that there were too many famous experts. Looking at the 6 people who were called out, they were all top-notch experts, and some of them were even a bit famous in the past. The pressure was huge. Chapter 947. Just as the guild leaders were at a loss as to what to say, the cleric who was cursing at them from the window suddenly retreated. Just as the 26 of them were about to heave a sigh of relief, they saw the priest retreat, and a warrior step forward. In his hand was the paper trumpet that the priest had used. He pressed the trumpet against his mouth and said, "Hey, hey, hey." After testing the trumpet, he asked, "Can you hear me?" He's actually doing a relay. The guild leaders were in tears. Was there a need to explain why this person had stepped forward? As expected, after testing the trumpet, this person yelled at the top of his lungs, "Barley Huang! Come out, I see you." The crowd was very quiet. After young Master Han had called out 6 names in a row, the crowd couldn't help but fall into a certain rhythm. Inexplicably, they had a sense of curiosity and anticipation about who would be called next. Now that they heard a name that they didn't know, everyone craned their necks to look left and right to see if there was any commotion, and that person would be called there. It was the same for the 26 guild leaders. They would only recognize people from their own guild. Every time they called out a name, they would look at which guild leader had a strange expression. Then they would know which guild it was. In the end, after this person was called out, the 26 guild leaders looked at each other. In the end, they all had a questioning look on their faces. None of them could see anything strange. Thus, someone asked in the party channel, "Which guild is he from?" No one replied. It wasn't that there were guild leaders who were dishonest. It was just that none of the 26 guild leaders knew this person's name. Unscathed in Battle took a look and felt that the effect of his calling out a name was too much of a difference compared to that of Han family young master. The guy who was pointed at did not react at all, nor did he look like he was being watched. This made Zhang Wuxiang feel very embarrassed. He was a little worried that he had seen wrongly, so he quickly picked up his binoculars to confirm it. Unscathed in Battle completely recognized the person's face. It was definitely Barley Huang. "Fuck you, ungrateful thing." Unscathed in Battle was anxious. Who was the one who taught you how to play the warrior? Now that you've grown your hair, you dare to pretend that you don't know me? This scolding even revealed some of the details of their past interactions. The guy who was being stared at by Wuxiang finally reacted. He jumped out angrily and shouted, "Fuck, I've changed my ID now. How would I know that the barley yellow you called is me? Damn it, if it's not you, who else could it be? Fuck, if I could still be barley yellow, why would I change my ID?" When everyone heard this, they understood. This guy probably didn't manage to get his old ID when he registered for the parallel world, and it was used by someone else. This phenomenon was very common in the parallel world, the online game that unified the world. Why didn't you tell me you changed your ID? Why didn't I tell you? When did you say that? Fuck, how would I remember? He still didn't say anything, did he? 20,000 people started crying. Killing intent, brother. Everyone came with killing intent. If this continued, their killing intent would go into the negatives. The elites of the tower also looked at Unscathed in Battle with disdain. Yutian Shunming went up to pull him down. Fuck, stop showing off your intelligence. It's embarrassing. Let me do it. What's the rush? I see a few. Yutian Shunming yelled. Go to the window over there and shout. It'll be messy if more people shout, Yutian Shunming said. Then let's wait a bit. Unscathed in Battle didn't want to give way. He had just shouted one, and he wasn't satisfied yet. The 26 guild leaders couldn't wait for the players to call out names one by one. After a brief discussion in the channel, they gave the order to attack. The players were quite amused when they heard names being called out. Suddenly, they received an order from their guild leader to do something with killing intent. For a moment, they were a bit dazed and their movements were a bit slow. However, the attack was still sent out. Unscathed in Battle and Yutian Shunming were still talking at the window. Suddenly, there was a gust of wind below. How could the archer Yutian Shunming not know what it was? He yelled, "Not good," and dodged. Unscathed in Battle's reaction wasn't slow either. He hastily ducked, only to hear a series of bang 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 sounds coming from the window. A few arrows flew in through the window and hit the wall, bouncing around. Fuck, why are we fighting just like that? Unscathed in Battle said as he crouched down by the window. Don't you think your face is too sarcastic? Yutian Shunming said. Fuck. What do we do? Unscathed in Battle looked towards Han family young master. Let's go upstairs. Han family young master pointed upwards. Everyone understood what he meant. If they were a bit higher than the archer's range, they could only watch helplessly. However, if they were too high up, they were afraid that the person shouting wouldn't be able to hear them. They would have to use their voice to shout. This Han family young master had shouted enough, so when it was someone else's turn to shout, he didn't care if they were tired or not. Actually, it's because he's too sarcastic. It's just that the opponent's attack was a bit slower, so they piled on top of us. Unscathed in battle whispered to Yutian Shenming. That's right, it's like that. Yutian Shenming nodded. The two of them climbed up just like that. Brother Yu was actually quite eager to give it a try, but he wasn't strong enough. He wasn't like Unscathed in battle and Yutian Shenming, who would fight to the death for something like this, so he could only line up at the end. At this moment, he wanted to follow Unscathed in battle and Yutian Shenming up the stairs, but when he saw that Han family young master and the others hadn't moved, he stopped and looked at the notebook in his hand. There's still a lot more. The notebook in Brother Yu's hand was a list of the experts and old friends from the 26 guilds. They were all people that they had interacted with in the game. Some of them were close, some were not. Some of them had added each other as friends after entering the game, while others hadn't. Most of them didn't change their IDs, but there were also some who did. Those who had changed their IDs, Brother Yu had found some on the forums, while some had been discovered on the spot. For example, the barley yellow that Unscathed in battle had just pointed out was someone who had changed his ID. Unscathed in battle had also discovered it by chance while observing the scene with his binoculars. As for those like Han family young master, 5 out of 6 of them were just bluffing. He had just randomly called out the IDs, and when the crowd gathered around, he was able to confirm his target. After all, there were over 20,000 people. It was quite a coincidence for Unscathed in battle to find someone he knew with his binoculars. At this time, Brother Yu had said there are still a lot, which meant that Han family young master had only pointed out 6, which was far from enough. In this list of acquaintances, there were a lot of names under Han family young master's name. This was because Han family young master's friend circle and sword demons to a certain extent overlapped. Even Brother Yu didn't know how long these two had been playing together. This was because from the moment Brother Yu entered the online gaming circle, these two were already famous. In terms of seniority, these two were even more senior than Brother Yu. Brother Yu and Unscathed in battle were considered the same generation, while Yutian Shenming was actually considered a junior. Most of the friends overlapped, and Brother Yu was probably mainly relying on Sword Demon to gather his friends. However, Brother Yu couldn't imagine the scene of Sword Demon standing at the window with his hands on his hips and yelling arrogantly. It wasn't that Sword Demon had never been arrogant, but he definitely wouldn't be arrogant in this kind of place. Sword Demon had already expressed that he would use other methods to deal with it. At that time, Brother Yu suddenly remembered that Sword Demon had asked for information on these guild members when this group of people first came to cause trouble. It was obvious that Sword Demon had long thought of using a peaceful method to solve this matter. Because of the studio's mischief, everyone fought and killed each other. In the end, it was the players who suffered losses. Perhaps the Sword Ghost had already visited the 26 major cities' guilds in private? Brother Yu guessed this, but he didn't ask. I know. You guys shout first. Han family young master heard Brother Yu's reminder and waved his hand. He then took out a bottle of wine from his pocket and drank it. Yinzhongmu Jiannan. These people were also there. They were also experts, but at this time, they had deeply realized the difference in weight compared to experts like Sword Demon. 10 Guild Alliance? Yinzhongmu smiled bitterly and shook his head. He realized that this group of experts just didn't want to do it. If they wanted to, their power could completely form a team on the scale of the 10 Guild Alliance. After all, at this stage of the game, the isolation between main cities was no longer a problem, especially for rich people who had the money to buy teleportation scrolls. Seeing that Sword Demon and Han family young master didn't intend to move, Brother Yu didn't ask anymore. He chased after Unscathed in battle and Yutian Shenming and ran upstairs. Yutian Shenming was now an expert archer. Naturally, he accurately determined the number of floors that were completely out of the archer's range. After reaching the floor, Unscathed in battle stretched out his head and felt a little dizzy. Damn, can I still hear this? I feel like the wind is so loud. Try it. Yutian Shenming pushed Unscathed in battle outside. Damn, why are you pushing? Are you trying to murder me? Unscathed in battle was almost pushed out of the building by Yutian Shenming. He was so shocked that he broke out in a cold sweat. Looking down from here, it was as high as 10 to 20 floors. If he fell, he would definitely be killed instantly. You sure are fast, Yutian Shenming urged. More than 20,000 players looked up at this time. The person who attacked the window immediately disappeared again. The guild masters already knew that they didn't succeed again. However, the world was finally quiet. The guild masters had already given the order to shoot if anyone stuck their head out. There was no need to wait for further orders. Then, the guild masters prepared to discuss how to deal with the matter of being called out. Before the opening remarks of the conference could be said, the crowd suddenly burst into an uproar. All the presidents looked up when they heard the commotion. They saw that Zhang Wuxiang had suddenly appeared on a higher level. He was holding a paper trumpet and testing the sound. Hey hey hey! This time he was much higher. The archers couldn't shoot anymore. The guild masters were nervous. It wasn't that they didn't expect the other party to do this. They just hoped that if he was a little higher, they wouldn't be able to hear him clearly because he was too far away. For example, this time, the guild masters didn't give the order to maintain silence. However, they didn't expect the guild players to be so self-aware. Once they saw that he was about to speak again, they very naturally quietened down. Can you not be so curious? The guild masters cried. Chapter 948. What the guild masters didn't want to happen continued. Although the opponents were standing taller and their voices sounded farther away, these two newcomers seemed to be the famous experts unscathed in battle and Yutian Shenming. They obviously had a natural advantage in terms of voice, and their voices were much louder than the previous cleric. Therefore, the distance and height weren't a problem. Under the circumstances where the players consciously kept quiet, their voices could still be heard clearly. The roll call was still going on. Seeing the experts being called out one after another, the guild masters felt that they really had to stop them. Therefore, they didn't care about propriety anymore and prepared to call out the names and ask the brothers who were called out what their attitude was. In the end, before they could carry out their plan, a name floated down from the clock tower and made all the guild masters tremble. This name was too sharp, because this was one of their 26 guild masters. Ninth Heaven. One of the 26 guild masters, a warrior profession, and an expert himself. At this time, his name was accurately called out by the people on the clock tower. Under the gaze of the other 25 guild masters, Ninth Heaven was at a loss because he was very sure that he didn't know any of these famous experts. After Ninth Heaven spread his hands to show his innocence, he raised his head and squinted his eyes to look at the window. Who could it be? Not to mention these experts, he didn't even have any friends in the entire Cloud City. At a height of tens of meters, it was really hard to see the face clearly. Ninth Heaven couldn't recognize it at all, but he could see that this person wasn't either unscathed in battle or Yutian Shenming, who were squeezing together at the window and shouting. Just as Ninth Heaven was wondering, the other party shouted again. Curious who I am, right? Haha, 10,000 points of wind. Do you understand now? 10,000 points of wind. Ninth Heaven's face showed a look of realization. The other guild masters saw it. Oh, this brother has also fallen. In fact, this time not only were the guild masters at a loss, but the experts on the clock tower were also at a loss. Unscathed in battle and Yutian Shenming moved to the left and right of Brother Yu. What's the situation? What's the situation? What is this 10,000 points of wind? One of my former forum sock puppets has a very good relationship with this Nine Heavens. Brother Yu said. Fuck, I couldn't tell. Brother, you still have a big move hidden up your sleeve. Isn't this a guild leader? Unscathed in battle and Yutian Shenming flipped through the roster. Ninth Heaven was one of the 26 guild leaders. Brother Yu laughed. You don't want to learn the good stuff, but you want to learn how to play suspense? Why didn't you say so earlier that you know a guild leader? Unscathed in battle said to Yutian Shenming. None of the experts recognized the guild leaders of the 26 guilds. Everyone felt helpless. The parallel world had indeed disrupted a lot of the order of the past. If it was an old MMORPG, friends who knew each other would join the same server and help each other get started together. It was relatively easier to create glory than players who started from scratch. But what about the parallel world? After entering the game, they were randomly assigned 100 main cities. If they weren't so lucky, their comrades would all be assigned together. As a result, everyone started from scratch. In the end, many old guilds couldn't continue their relationship. Sword Demon's Defiant Guild was just one of them. Those who alienated Sword Demon because of their looks, and those who lost to Gu Fei and were disappointed in Sword Demon were definitely not the closest friends to Sword Demon. People like Lu Ku and Deepwater. From the start of the parallel world, everyone basically went their separate ways. This was actually the main reason why the Defiant Guild failed to regroup. As a result, it could only be said that Sword Demon and the other experts didn't know the 26 guild leaders. It could only be said that they were unlucky. But they didn't think that Brother Yu would actually recognize one of them. It was just that he suddenly announced it on the spot. Everyone didn't like this kind of method very much. It was too much like a certain person's style. Don't do it again, don't do it again. Brother Yu hurriedly explained to the two. But this feeling of not revealing anything was really good. Do you remember now? Do you need me to say something to confirm your identity? Brother Yu continued to build a relationship with Ninth Heaven. No need, no need. Add me as a friend first. Ninth Heaven hurriedly shouted. When everyone heard this, it seemed that the private conversation between these two wasn't suitable to be spread out. This showed that the relationship between these two wasn't shallow. After saying this, Ninth Heaven opened the friend button and immediately received a system notification that Brother Yu had added him as a friend. He was stunned for a while before sending a message to Brother Yu. So you're Brother Yu? Haha, yes. Why didn't you tell me earlier? There's nothing to say. If I said I was Brother Yu, would you still worship me? Ninth Heaven was silent for a while and told the truth. Not at all. After all, Brother Yu was different from Sword Demon and unscathed in battle. He was equivalent to a guy who often ran around in movies, a guy that everyone was familiar with. He had no acting skills, no looks, no aura, and no potential or talent could be seen. Of course, few people would admire and worship such a character. When his name was mentioned, everyone would only say, "Oh, Brother Yu, I know that guy." Unlike Sword Demon and the others, when everyone was mentioned, they could tell a few stories about their experiences. What exactly is the meaning of this now? Ninth Heaven was indeed quite familiar with Brother Yu's sock puppet. When he heard that this person was Brother Yu, he didn't dwell on the sock puppet matter, and immediately started discussing the current situation. Please come up and have a seat. How about it? Do you dare? Us. Who are you referring to? Of course it's the 26 presidents, Brother Yu said. What do you mean? Ninth Heaven was puzzled. I have something to say. Can't say it now. It's not convenient to have too many people, Brother Yu said. What do you want to say? It's better if everyone says it together, Brother Yu said. Why? Ditto. Fuck. Ninth Heaven was a little confused. Suddenly he asked Brother Yu, "You haven't proven your identity." There was one time. Brother Yu casually picked out a few things that both of them had chatted about. Nine Heavens could only confirm this identity now. With his relationship with Brother Yu, he wouldn't suspect Brother Yu of harming him. I'm fine with it. But don't tell me you want me to convince the others? Ninth Heaven said. He wasn't familiar with the others. Just look at him now. After he was named, the other 25 presidents looked at him differently. They already had the tendency to kick him out of their small circle. There'll be a lot of people to convince. Brother Yu said. Ninth Heaven suddenly understood. Fuck, you guys did all this for this. You'll know in a bit that it's actually quite necessary, Brother Yu said. Then what about me now? Ninth Heaven asked. The experts in the guild have been named one by one. You guys probably can't sit still. The presidents will probably take the initiative to ask, right? Brother Yu said. Yeah, that's it. Brother Yu said. Then will my guild be selected again? Nine Heavens said. Is it embarrassing to be named? They aren't embarrassing, but I am. Ninth Heaven said. Fuck. People are all being pointed at by top-notch experts. What am I? Brother Yu, you're a fucking sock puppet. Fuck. Ninth Heaven said. Fuck you. Brother Yu was depressed. Why was he being looked down on everywhere he went? This wasn't right. After Ninth Heaven ended his private chat with Brother Yu, he was met with the questioning gazes of the other presidents. This time, they didn't have to find their own brothers to talk about this slightly awkward question. There was someone else they could ask. They said that they mainly want to talk to us. Ninth Heaven didn't wait for them to ask and directly said, talk about what? I don't know. Ninth Heaven shook his head. Where? Ninth Heaven pointed at the clock tower. They dare let us in? They only let the presidents in. The presidents looked at each other, their expressions all suspicious. Ninth Heaven could only smile bitterly. He guessed that everyone was suspecting that he had betrayed them, and was preparing to send them into a trap. Ninth Heaven was still in the president's small team. He couldn't even use the team channel. A bunch of presidents all shrank to the side for a small meeting, brazenly pushing Ninth Heaven to the side. What do you think? Someone asked. I think that if they really want to use him to set up a trap, isn't this an unnecessary move? Someone said. I think Ninth Heaven is the same as the brothers who were pointed out. There's not much difference. So those who were pointed out will say the same thing as us? The presidents weren't stupid after all. So someone immediately went to ask the one who was pointed out. Indeed, the other party also had the intention to say this to the president. Then can't you just say it directly? Just say it directly. Do you dare to enter? Now that there's another person to bring the message. This person stopped halfway. This was a very sensitive question. This was a test of whether everyone trusted the brother who was pointed out. In an instant, everyone was suddenly envious of Ninth Heaven again. He was pointed out directly. He didn't have to go through this torture. Whether it was true or false, they could directly judge. Unlike them, who doubted their opponents and trusted their friends, then considered whether their friends would be deceived, whether their friends would lie to them, whether their friends would collude with the other party. Tangled, contradictory, and hovering between life and death. If they have anything to say, let them say it like this, someone said. If they could say it like this, they would have shouted it long ago. There's no need to go through so much trouble. What's there that they don't dare to say face to face? Who knows? I still think it's a trap. What's the use of a trap? Even if they lure us into the clock tower, and we're all killed, so what? At most, our presidents will all drop a level. It's not like we'll be silenced. The discussion was very intense. It was very heaven-defying. This question was obviously very difficult. The bosses of the studios, who were blocked by more than 20,000 people and couldn't see the scene, weren't idle at this time. They couldn't see, but they could ask around. 26 guilds, 26,000 people. It was impossible for all of them to be pure. Even if they were, it was very easy to bribe them into being impure on the spot. Chapter 949. Studios weren't good at fighting, but they were good at gathering information. This was also an important indicator of a studio's strength. Now that everyone was gathered together, there was a bit of competition in this area. I found out what you couldn't find out, and this was something to be proud of. However, there were no bosses that could stand out and be proud of themselves. Although they didn't have to worry about not finding out, they still needed time. Just by looking at the crowd, they already knew that this would be a bit difficult. Even the people from the 26 guilds wouldn't know what was going on unless they were in the innermost circle. As for the bosses, they were in a very miserable position. They were gathered together with the players from Cloud City, but they weren't onlookers. To be more precise, they were onlookers. Right now, the onlookers were small fries from the outer circle of the 26 guilds. How much longer are we going to stay like this? The news hadn't come, and the situation didn't change. The bosses couldn't help but feel anxious. If this continues and the fight doesn't break out, won't our efforts be in vain? The bosses were silent. This situation was very likely to happen. In this stalemate where no one could do anything to the other, the only thing they could do was to communicate. This communication might lead to nothing in the end. This was not a situation that the studios were willing to see. Looks like we have to step in, Matchless Wonder suddenly said. The bosses all looked at him. They obviously understood what Matchless Wonder meant. This was all part of their plan. Isn't it a bit early? Nitrite said. Still early? If this drags on, we won't be able to fight, right? Or is this what you want to see? Unparalleled Wonder knew that there was a hidden meaning in his words whenever he talked to Nitrite. Of course, he had every reason to hate Nitrite so much. The problem is Qianli is drunk and not online. Isn't this a waste of time? Nitrite said. Really? Qianli is drunk and not online? What's going on? It's almost noon, and he's not online yet. What's wrong with him? A boss said. Matchless Hero gritted his teeth. This was a trap he had created, but now he couldn't get out of it. The goal of his cooperation with the studios was to destroy Qianli and ensure that the high-efficiency leveling method business continued. But personally, he was not as concerned about the high-efficiency leveling method as the other studios. He would be happier if the deal was completely ruined. For him, it was just one less profitable project, but Yin Tung would be finished because of it. Unfortunately, the current situation could not be completely destroyed. Yin Tung had also carefully prepared for this transaction. As soon as they started, they established a foothold in 30 main cities, following which they pulled in other workshops as well. Unparalleled genius couldn't be destroyed, and couldn't be destroyed. He could only think of a way to reduce Yinting's profits. As soon as Qianli got drunk, these people continued to oppose him and ruin his plans. Unparalleled Hero's heart raced at the thought of this, and he was warned by the system. Now he had tied all the studios together to deal with Qianli, but everyone's purpose was slightly different. The others only wanted to destroy Qianli, so that the high-efficiency leveling method business wouldn't be disturbed. That was all. What about his unparalleled talent? He wanted to use this opportunity to settle his old and new grudges. As a result, he was in a similar situation. He couldn't sit still anymore, but the others wouldn't act until they saw the rabbit. Unparalleled genius took 2 deep breaths. Now was not the time to be angry. He had experienced the system's concern for the health of the players. After calming himself down, Unparalleled genius spoke again. If you guys really want to wait until Qianli gets drunk and goes online, then it'll be a bit troublesome. Based on my long-term observation of this fellow, he would usually come online during peak hours after dinner, which was at least 6 or 7 hours from now. 6 or 7 hours. Do you think this situation can be maintained until then? Moreover, Qianli hasn't come online yet. That in itself is a problem. Knowing that there's going to be a huge battle, Qianli's drunk isn't online. What do you guys think this means? Unparalleled genius said. It's very overpowered. They're planning to settle this peacefully. Someone blurted out. That's right, it's very overpowered. Isn't the current situation forcing the 26 guilds to sit down and settle this with them? Unparalleled genius said. Damn it, what's going on up ahead? Why haven't we heard anything yet? Under Unparalleled Wonder's provocation, the already anxious boss finally reached Unparalleled Wonder's state of anxiety, and could no longer sit still. But if they fight now, it won't be easy for them to last 6 or 7 hours, someone said. Haha. Unparalleled Wonder laughed. If a fight really broke out, would 1,000 miles drunk wait until nighttime to log in? That's right. Another owner exclaimed. He'll definitely be called up. That's why we don't need to worry about whether or not Qianli will be able to make it in time. There's no way he'll miss it. What we need to do is make sure that this situation happens. Unparalleled genius concluded. Let's do it. Yeah. We can't wait any longer. Unparalleled genius's analysis was quite successful this time. Many owners stood on his side. Unparalleled genius glanced at Nitrite Radical proudly. He had always suspected that there was more to Nitrite Radical, and very overpowered. However, he had purposely tied Nitrite Radical into this matter. This was one of his cleverness. If the Nitrite Radicals were to be tied together, then the Nitrite Radicals and the extremely heaven-defying group would have fallen out with each other, and would no longer be related. If the matter didn't work out, then it would be a different story. If the matter didn't work out because of the nitrite radicals, then he would have ruined everyone's business and cut off everyone's source of income. He would have no way of shirking his responsibility. If there were other reasons, then there was nothing to say. The result would be that no one would be able to do business, and the nitrite radicals wouldn't be spared. In the end, the most important thing was that unparalleled genius had Chun-Chi as his trump card. Otherwise, why would it be said that the ownership of production materials was the most important? No matter what, shouldn't we wait for this wave of news to come back? Nitrite Radical said when he saw the owner's impatient expressions. Wuxia, why are you so calm? Is it because you've earned enough efficient leveling methods? Unparalleled Genius said in a strange tone. No matter what, he would not let Yinteng go. Therefore, he had to blame Yinteng. I just think that our large-scale promotion is only a backup plan. If possible, everyone would still want to sit back and observe the situation, right? It hasn't been long since the situation started. Isn't it a little too rushed for us to start the backup plan now? Nitrite Radical said. The backup plan is to be used according to the situation. What does it have to do with time? In the current situation, the earlier we use the backup plan, the better it is. Wuxia, you don't like this backup plan. Are you afraid that some of your friends won't be too happy? Unparalleled Genius sneered. In his opinion, Nitrite Radical had a reason to not want the studio to be involved too much. He still wanted to continue working with very overpowered. This kid wanted to earn money, but didn't want to offend anyone. Unparalleled Genius was determined not to let him get what he wanted. He had to make him suffer. After another round of debate, Unparalleled Genius had the upper hand. The bosses all ordered their subordinates to start moving. The people from the studios that were scattered all over Cloud City immediately began to incite the crowd, calling everyone to fight against the invaders. From the leveling area, to the tavern, to the revival point, to the crowd that was already gathered around the clock tower to watch the show. The bosses had already started to quickly leave. In their opinion, once the battle started, this place would definitely become the center of the war. It would be too dangerous to watch the show from a close distance. Inciting the crowd always took time. The workers of the studios worked hard to give speeches everywhere, while the bosses quietly waited for news. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. After a long time, Cloud City was still peaceful. Some bosses couldn't help but look at the crowd that was watching the show. It was no different from when they left. In their opinion, that place should be the easiest place to incite anger. They also had the most people there. However, half an hour had passed. Why wasn't there any commotion? It was as if nothing had happened. The bosses couldn't sit still anymore and asked. The answer was that the incitement was continuing. Of course, the bosses didn't know the lowest level of incitement. They all had people in charge in this area, and these people in charge were sweating cold sweat. They didn't know why, but the incitement work in Cloud City wasn't going well. The people they sent to incite were all sarcastic. Everyone agreed that the players in Cloud City were very heartless and cold-blooded. When the people in charge first heard this report, they didn't believe it at all. They personally went to verify it, changed many places, and found that the situation was very real. It was just that they were heartless. The people in charge who personally went to the field found that the players clearly had the desire to kill them. Why was it like this? The people in charge were puzzled. At this time, the boss asked another question. They didn't know how to answer, so they could only delay it for the time being. Of course, not all the people in charge used the stall tactic. There were also some who told the truth. As a result, a shop owner immediately jumped out and shouted, "Damn, are the players of Cloud City all heartless? Can't we incite them? How could there be such a thing?" Most of the bosses received the incitement to continue tactic. They didn't think about it at all. "It's true. My people said it," the boss said. The bosses laughed and felt that this guy's subordinates didn't do their job well. Then the bosses received similar reports one after another. Then another piece of information came through. Today the guild leader of a certain guild in Cloud City specially ordered them not to get into conflict with players from other cities. If anyone tried to provoke them, they should resolutely ignore them. Chapter 950. If this information was only heard by one person, the bosses would not care too much. Everyone had their own ambitions. At times like this, they would want to preserve their own strength and prevent their guild members from participating in the possible war. However, at this moment, the rumors encountered a strange obstacle that they had never encountered before. This piece of information was very thought-provoking. The bosses looked at each other and did not communicate. They immediately ordered their respective guilds to inquire about the information. This time, the results came very quickly. The bosses were speechless. All of the guild leaders they asked had given the same instruction, without exception. Was this a coincidence? All the guild leaders thought of the same thing? Or was it a private agreement between the guild leaders? However, the problem was that there was no need to make an agreement for this kind of thing. If they were willing to participate, then so be it. If they were not willing, then so be it. If they were willing to participate, then it was reasonable for them to make an agreement. The bosses felt that something was wrong, but they did not say anything. They had already given their respective orders, hoping to get more detailed and accurate information. However, after asking around, the results were as such. The guild leaders of the various guilds only gave such an order, and there wasn't much explanation for it. After a moment of silence, someone finally spoke. "What do you guys think?" "I don't believe this is a coincidence," someone said. "Nonsense, how can there be such a coincidence? If it's a mutual agreement, then why? For this kind of thing, if other guilds are willing to participate, then let them do it. We won't lose out even if we don't participate. It seems like there is no need to make an agreement and not participate." Someone voiced out the question that everyone had in their hearts. Could it be like this? Suddenly someone said, "According to the analysis, very overpowered should be quite hated in Cloud City. These guilds made such an agreement. Perhaps they are taking the opportunity to use this group of external forces to eliminate very overpowered? It's very overpowered. Originally, it wasn't popular, but after 1,000 Miles Drunk popularized the high-efficiency leveling method in Cloud City, the situation seems to have changed." Another person said. The previous boss immediately smiled. Yes, the Cloud City players' view of them is very likely to change because of this, but some people will not. Ooh, the guild leaders. All the bosses suddenly understood. That's right. The more normal players were grateful to extremely defiant, the more guild leaders would be envious and jealous of extremely defiant. Most people wouldn't have such emotions, but the president did. The opportunity before them didn't count as hitting them while they were down. It was just a matter of self-preservation, which would allow them to face a calamity. The guild leaders probably didn't want to miss this opportunity, which was why they had issued such an order together. This command was very simple and easy to understand. It didn't require much explanation, and the guild players didn't think too much about it. Unlike the bosses of the studio, they could not discover such coincidences through information channels. At most, they only knew the decision of the guild in their small circle of friends, not to mention that most people's circle of friends were basically comrades in the same guild. How can the guilds in Cloud City be so united? Some bosses were still a little confused. Of course, not all guilds. Let me ask everyone here, out of all the guilds you've asked around, have any of them been small guilds below level 4? A person said. All the bosses looked at each other, and in the end, they all shook their heads. Only large guilds had commercial value. There wasn't a second guild that was as small and strong as extremely defiant. The human resources of the studio weren't limitless, and with limited resources, who would invest in a small guild with no future? Of course, they all tried their best to keep their information channels open with the large guilds, so none of the guild information they gathered was about the small guilds. I think there should be a lot of small guilds that didn't participate in this agreement, but they're alone and need to observe the situation. In this situation where the large guilds have made their stance clear, their stance is also clear, so our instigation didn't have any reaction. Because we can't instigate the large guilds, these small guilds see that the large guilds aren't moving, so of course they won't move. Makes sense. Everyone nodded. The world is dangerous. It's not a good thing to be a tall tree that attracts the wind. Another boss lamented. Matchless Hero listened on the side, and his lamentation didn't feel good. He had been so miserable recently, and when he heard the saying, "Tall tree attracts the wind," he couldn't help but think that this old man was implying something about him. As for this discussion, Matchless Hero didn't say a word, because the discussion of the bosses was beyond his expectations. When he discovered this situation, his first thought was that Extremely Defiant was prepared and organized all the guilds to prevent anyone from taking the opportunity to cause trouble. But before he could say anything, the bosses all came up with a version that the guilds in Cloud City wanted to kill with a borrowed knife. This time Matchless Hero was in a daze. Everyone's analysis was very reasonable, and the possibility was very high. In comparison, his own assumption was a bit oversensitive. Did he think too highly of Extremely Defiant? Moreover, this was Extremely Defiant, so what was there to be afraid of? Should he stop it? Wasn't that a good thing to help them out? Boss guy, why aren't you saying anything this time? I wonder if he's hiding something from us again. After the bosses finished their discussion, they realized that Matchless Genius hadn't said a word this time. From this, it could be seen that Matchless Hero had a very strong presence. Even if he didn't say anything, everyone could still sense it. Everyone's analysis is very reasonable. I was originally wondering if Extremely Defiant was up to something, but now that everyone has said it, I can relax. Matchless Hero was still trying to find a way to express his doubts. Extremely Defiant? Why are they doing this? Do they really want to challenge these 26 guilds? So they told the guilds in Cloud City not to interfere? Someone laughed. In his heart, he felt that Matchless Hero was being a bit too worried. Then what do you guys think we should do? Matchless Hero said, I think we can continue to incite them. Since we already know this situation, we need to find a different way to incite them. Even though these guilds are small, a single spark can start a prairie fire. We should be able to use it as a fuse. Once the situation escalates, the bigger guilds will have no choice but to join in. If it really doesn't work, we can just send some people to sneak into the crowd and start a fight. The bosses were all geniuses. They had more and more ideas than the last. Okay, let's continue. Matchless Hero nodded. The incitement continued. Of course, their strategy had been adjusted. When faced with players from guilds who had banned them, they no longer fanned the flames like before. Instead, they would say things like, I heard that XX guild doesn't allow players to do this and that, or why aren't the big guilds doing anything? They were trying to reveal the secret agreement between the big guilds to the normal players. Then, when faced with players who weren't from guilds or players from small to medium-sized guilds, they would continue their previous path of fanning the flames. The insiders' hearts grew colder and colder. They realized that not only were there no effects, but they seemed to have become mature. This was because no one else was saying these things. The rumors were always spread by them, and no one else was discussing them. As time went on, the gossipers became more and more isolated. They felt more and more like they had been stripped naked and thrown in front of everyone. The people in charge of the various studios realized that the situation wasn't good. They stopped inciting the rumors and reported to their bosses. This time, they weren't saying that Cloud City's players were heartless, or that their willpower was too strong. The experienced people in charge had already noticed that this resistance to rumors wasn't a coincidence. This was a deliberate precaution against them. The bosses believed in the professional judgment of their subordinates and were shocked. They all looked at Matchless Hero in unison. Is it really so overpowered that they took precautions? If it's really overpowered, why would they do this? Matchless Hero said in a deep voice. To protect the interests of the Cloud City players? Do you think they are that noble? I don't know, I'm not sure. Someone said. Fuck, if they have such thoughts, why did they do this during the city war? In the entire parallel world, only the Cloud City players didn't get any benefits from the city war. Why? It's because they were overpowered and took away the benefits that should have belonged to the players. That's not the same thing, right? That's the rule of the game. A boss said. Fuck, what about Qianli's drunk? Can a player with quality kill people all over the world like he did? Matchless Hero said. This time, everyone was speechless. Qianli's drunk reputation was out there. Just based on the PK points he broke time and time again. Who would believe that he wasn't a demon? Extremely heaven-defying people are definitely not noble. Matchless Genius concluded. Then why are they doing this? Do they already have a 100% way to deal with the 26 guilds? A boss said and looked towards the direction of the clock tower. Although they weren't there anymore, they still left people to monitor the situation. The information they received was the same as when they left. Or perhaps, this move of theirs is to guard against us. Matchless Genius said. Fuck, are they immortals or monsters? How can they know about Qianli's actions when we're so far away? A boss didn't believe it. Wuxia, what do you think? Matchless Hero suddenly changed the topic. Nitrite, who hadn't said a word, was unfortunately shot again. Chapter 951. Unparalleled Wonder was once again suspecting nitrite radicals, and a very heaven-defying conspiracy. All the bosses looked over and saw nitrite radicals' expression of helplessness. He said, Boss guy, if you always think that way, you might as well tell me to stay far away and wait for your news. Haha, I believe you, Matchless Wonder said with a fake smile. Matchless Genius put on a fake smile. I'm just reminding you. I'm afraid you might accidentally stand on the opposite side of us. Matchless Wonder said that reminding nitrite radical was fake, but in reality, he was hinting that nitrite radical might not be on the same side as them. This was why Matchless Wonder wanted nitrite radical and Yuntung to be together. He was always looking for an opportunity to make nitrite radical and Yuntung be ostracized in their circle. Nitrite radical didn't say anything and just shook his head. The other bosses didn't seem to understand the hidden meaning in Matchless Hero's words. They all laughed it off and brought the topic back to how they were going to proceed. The incitement plan had failed, but they had still wasted a lot of time. It had been more than an hour since they started. Everyone, time is of the essence. I have a backup plan that might work, Matchless Wonder said. Boss guy, tell us. Matchless Wonder smiled sinisterly, but didn't say anything. He just looked in a certain direction. The bosses all looked in the direction he was looking at, and saw a group of people walking over. When they got closer, they recognized them as Matchless Wonder's subordinates. They had seen them before, but since they wanted to watch a show, they didn't want to group up, so they sent their subordinates away. The group of people walked over and stood behind Matchless Wonder. Matchless Wonder stood to the side and showed them to the others, saying, Everyone look. Look at what? The bosses froze. Weren't they just his subordinates? What was there to look at? Look at the equipment? What a joke. They were all bosses of studios. Even if their resources couldn't compare to Ing Chi's, it was still easy for them to create a dozen high-quality characters. Everyone look carefully, Matchless Wonder said. Boss guy, didn't you say that time was of the essence? Why are you keeping us in suspense? Someone couldn't help but say. As soon as he finished speaking, some of the shop owners noticed the details. They took a few steps closer and stared at the badges on their chests. These badges, haha, not bad. This is the emblem of the guild Flying Moon, Matchless Genius said. Flying Moon of Dragon City was one of the 26 guilds. Matchless elites had actually made a copy of this guild's emblem, so their goal was obvious. There are other things here. Matchless Hero waved his hand, and his subordinates took out many wooden boxes. Each box had a symbol on it, and they opened it for the bosses to see. These were the emblems of the 26 guilds, one for each guild. Apart from that, there were also several pages of paper inside the boxes. Some of the bosses pulled out the pages and saw that it recorded the equipment of their guild's elite experts. The boss was taken aback. Then he scanned the boxes and asked, Where's the Flying Moon from Dragon City? Here. Matchless Genius smiled as he handed over the list of Flying Moon's experts. That person took the box and glanced at the group of people behind Matchless Genius. He exclaimed, Boss guy, your disguise is really thorough. Matchless Genius smiled. This is fully utilizing our advantage. Only our workshop can disguise to this extent. I think everyone understands what I mean, right? It's not just the badges. With our workshop's ability, We can disguise all of these people's equipment. Everyone take a look at this list of equipment. If it's convenient, we can disguise ourselves as 2 guilds. Is that okay? No problem, the bosses said as they began to prepare themselves. Matchless Genius walked in front of Nitrite and personally handed him a box. Boss Nitrite, you only need to disguise as 1 guild. The bosses all looked over and saw the word Defy written on the box that Matchless Genius handed Nitrite. It was very overpowered. Everyone guessed it. Matchless Genius smiled sinisterly. Nitrite had to accept this box even if he didn't want to. Nitrite didn't seem troubled at all. He took the box and opened it as he said, "If it's very overpowered, how many people can't disguise it? Haha, I've prepared this for you too." Matchless Genius waved his hand, and someone handed him a sword. The bosses were all shocked. The Dark Knight Light Sword? But then, everyone realized that it wasn't the Dark Knight Light Sword. It just looked like it, but it was a genuine fake. You just need to pretend. Boss Nitrite wouldn't really pretend to be the real Qianli drunk, right? Even if I gave you the real Dark Knight Light Sword, you wouldn't be able to disguise it, Matchless Genius said. Boss guy, you really put a lot of effort into this. Nitrite took the fake sword. How much effort did he put in to get this? Outsiders didn't know, but they could see that Matchless Genius had put in a lot of effort to fix the very overpowered and Qianli drunk. As for the dagger called Sword Demon, I think Boss Nitrite should be able to disguise it yourself, right? Sword Demon's trademark isn't his dagger, it's his skill, Nitrite said. Then you'll have to figure out a way to overcome it, Boss Nitrite. What about the dance style of the thin waist dance? Boss Nitrite, I agree that these people can't be replicated. You can choose not to let them appear, or you can disguise them. You don't need me to teach you that, do you? I'm just afraid of making a loophole, Nitrite said. We'll help you keep an eye on it. If you make a loophole, we'll remind you, Matchless Genius said with a double meaning. The other bosses were already numb to the bickering between the two, so they didn't pay attention to them. They each held 2 badge boxes and took the equipment list to their subordinates, asking them to send equipment over. Studios were extremely efficient. It didn't take long for the people to arrive and the equipment to be delivered. The bosses would then distribute the equipment one by one according to the list. Finally, they would wear the badge and the experts would immediately copy it. Who were they? The studio. In the game, other than Gufei, Thin Waist Dance, and Sword Demon, there was no equipment that they didn't have. Just as Matchless Genius said, this was the advantage of their studio. Matchless Genius had thought of this a long time ago. The equipment list and badges were all prepared, but he didn't tell anyone about it beforehand. He was still guarding against the Nitrite radicals. Even if Nitrite really colluded with very overpowered to sabotage the studio, it was already an urgent matter. What could the other party do if they found out? The cosplay teams of the studios finished equipping themselves. The bosses opened up the map and divided up the areas. They immediately sent these guys out to cause trouble. On the other hand, Nitrite radicals also joined in. They could stand on the side of Cloud Peak City and no longer spread rumors. Instead, they could lead the resistance against the invasion. They could mobilize the masses and provoke the 26 guilds, throwing the situation into chaos. Matchless Genius finally smiled proudly as he thought of his plan. He felt that this plan was impeccable. The fighters of the studios weren't weak. With the studios spending a lot of money to equip them, they would immediately be at the top of the world. Wouldn't it be a piece of cake for them to bully normal players? In an instant, it was as if a group of hooligans had suddenly appeared in Cloud City, causing trouble everywhere. If they bumped into someone, kill. If they couldn't make a deal, kill. If they were muttered behind their backs, kill. If they weren't pleasing to the eye, kill. In short, the teams started killing their way to their respective areas of disruption. The people they killed along the way were all normal players. Soon Cloud City was in chaos. Very Overpowered appeared at the right time and mobilized the players to counterattack. Many of the people who were killed in the process had received orders from their guilds not to participate. However, now that they were killed, how could they not fight back? They all roared in their guilds. The Four Seas colorful clouds singing to Wine, Guns and Roses, Black and White Alliance of Life and Death, etc., big and small, Old and new, strong and weak, all of them were attacked. Some died, some survived, but they were all filled with anger. The arrogance and unreasonableness of the other party was intolerable. When the guild leader received the report, he was shocked. His first reaction wasn't to appease the guild members, but to inform very defiant of the news. Oh, finally can't sit still anymore? In the clock tower, after receiving the news, the Han family young master sneered. However, Sword Demon and the others had serious expressions. Their gazes all looked directly opposite them. Directly opposite them were the 26 guild leaders who participated in this expedition. In the end, the guild leaders still entered the clock tower to meet with Sword Demon and the others because they really had no other choice. They were in a stalemate under the clock tower. The other party had at most 200 people, but they had more than 20,000 people. If this continued, who knew who would be in pain? The people who came to bring the message all promised their guild leaders that they had something to say this time. And it wouldn't be a trap or a trap. Some guild leaders believed them happily, but some still had doubts. In the end, Very Overpowered threw down several teleportation scrolls, but only one of the 26 guild leaders was sent up to see the situation. Why this guild leader? Because this was obviously a suicide mission, and it was too embarrassing to send a player. In the end, everyone drew lots, and this guy was lucky enough to get the chance to choose one of the 26. Therefore, under everyone's comfort of it's okay, at most I'll drop a level. This guild leader stripped off his top-grade equipment and went up to the clock tower. Once he went up, he immediately felt relieved. There weren't many very overpowered people in the clock tower. If all 26 guild leaders went up, they would even have the advantage in numbers. Moreover, the other party's super expert, Qianli, was drunk and simply not around. What was there to be afraid of? Therefore, all the guild leaders were teleported up to the clock tower to see how this stalemate could be broken. Chapter 952. What did Very Overpowered want to say? Before they opened their mouths, the guild leaders all had their own plans. They were the type of people who frequently interacted with people, so they could see the situation clearly. Very Overpowered probably wanted to explain the whole thing, and then resolve it peacefully. However, what was there to explain about this matter? The guild leaders already understood the whole situation. Their subordinates came to fight against Very Overpowered for the sake of the reward, but in the end, they were completely defeated. Of course, their original intention wasn't very overpowered. Were they supposed to just wait for death? If this matter ended just like that, there wouldn't be any guild leader who would muster such a large force to take revenge. At most, the guild leader would come to lend a helping hand in private. After all, they wouldn't do so in the name of the guild. But the various rumors that spread around the main cities undoubtedly pushed them to the edge of the fire. The guild leaders couldn't tolerate it, and neither could their fellow guild members. What they needed to do now wasn't to find Very Overpowered for an explanation. They were in the wrong, so what explanation did they need? Their goal was to use Very Overpowered to rebuild their guild's image. This matter didn't even need to mention Feng Shuang's previous actions. The main problem was that their guild was being slandered and ridiculed. This was the reason. Coming to Cloud City to destroy Very Overpowered was the result they wanted. There were many things in this world that couldn't be explained by right and wrong. The guild leaders had already made up their minds. Did they want to reason with this matter? There was no need to say anything. They came up to meet with Very Overpowered just because it wasn't a good idea to stay outside the clock tower. They had no other choice. Now that they knew there was no trap in the tower, some guild leaders had already taken care of this guy and asked if they wanted to go in. No rush. We're already at this point. There's no rush to make a move. At this moment, it's fine to let them talk. The guild leaders teleported to the clock tower and were already prepared for battle. But when they arrived, the first thing they heard was, "There's wine at the staircase. If you want it, take it yourself." The guild leaders couldn't help but look towards the staircase. Sure enough, there was a lot of wine there, and it was good wine. Being a guild leader of a big guild didn't necessarily mean that they were rich. Most people wouldn't be able to bear to drink such good wine. Sure enough, there were people among the 26 guild leaders who loved wine. 3 of them couldn't help but want to grab a bottle. The others frantically tried to stop them with glares, but the 3 of them had long since lost their ground. Each of them took a bottle and drank as they returned to their group. They even asked the others, "You guys don't want it?" All the presidents had tears streaming down their faces. "How can the 3 of you be the president? Haven't you heard of the saying that you have to be soft-hearted when you eat from others? Just a little bit of good wine can corrupt you?" The 3 of them continued to act without any self-awareness. As they drank, they discussed, "Ah, this is good wine. Have you tried it before?" "Nonsense, of course I've drunk it, but who would be willing to buy it normally? Look, there are still a lot of them. They don't want to drink." "It's all ours?" "I don't think so. There are still some heaven-defying people here." "Aren't they going to die soon?" "Oh, that's right." All the presidents were on the verge of crying when they heard the conversation between the 3 of them in the channel. They actually remembered what they were here for. But why did it feel like they were robbing them of wine? "Since you asked us to come up, why don't you cut it short now?" Some presidents couldn't bear to see the 3 of them continue to be unreasonable, and took the initiative to talk to the heaven-defying people. "All right, actually we aren't familiar with each other. No need for introductions." A president interrupted Han Family Young Master's words with a rough voice. Han Family Young Master glanced at this person and continued to speak calmly. "What I mean is that we aren't familiar with each other, so there's nothing much to say. I invited all of you here because I want to invite all of you to watch a show." "Watch a show?" All the presidents were at a loss. What the other party said was completely different from what they had imagined. "What show?" someone asked. "Let's see if your subordinates outside will continue to wait obediently after all of you guild masters are here," Han Family's young master said. "What do you mean?" All the presidents didn't understand. "Why don't we make a bet? I bet that your people will soon be disobedient." Han Family Young Master laughed. "Disobedient? How would that be considered disobedient?" "For example, running around killing someone, setting a fire," Han Family Young Master said. "Interesting." A president couldn't help but laugh coldly. "What if you lose the bet?" Some presidents already had the intention to participate. Other than wine lovers, there were also gambling lovers among the 26 of them. "Jump down from here." Han Family Young Master knocked on the window beside him. "Interesting, I've never seen such a flying person before." A president laughed. This was true. Anything could happen in the game, but no one would be stupid enough to play this kind of high jump. Even if someone was curious and wanted to watch, they couldn't just randomly grab someone off the street and throw them down from high ground, right? Even if it was a game, this kind of behavior would be very cruel. After all, most of the gamers were normal people. Even if their true nature was exposed in the virtual world, there weren't that many perverts. Not only will you have the chance to watch today, you might even have the chance to act as a flying person yourself, Han Family Young Master said. The president's expression immediately changed. "Whoever loses will jump. Is there a need to explain?" Han Family Young Master said. Of course there was no need to explain, but the problem was that the presidents didn't expect the other party to want them to make such a bet. They thought that if they were to bet, the other party would definitely ask them to leave if they lost. In the end, the conditions were exactly the same. With such conditions, even if they won the bet, what benefits would they get? Fall to death? Moreover, there was something wrong with the gamble he proposed. What were these heaven-defying fellows planning? The presidents sized up the group of overpowered people standing opposite them. They were all looking at them calmly, as if waiting for their reply. There were only 2 fellows who were huddled by a window in the room, and seemed to be fighting over something. This clearly didn't match the current atmosphere. The presidents were confused, but the 2 people seemed to sense that everyone was looking at them and turned around. Ahem. The older warrior coughed and said, "The scenery isn't bad." Only an idiot would believe that they were fighting over the scenery. However, the young man quickly spoke. "I say, bosses, don't your guilds recruit beauties?" The presidents wanted to vomit blood. These 2 shameless people were actually looking at the beauties of their guilds. Female players were already a rare species, not to mention beautiful players. All the guilds treated their beautiful girls as treasures. At this moment, they were actually being groped in such a wretched manner. They immediately felt as if someone was trying to steal their divine beast. The presidents were furious, but if they exploded because of this, wouldn't they be like the three guys who smiled at the sight of alcohol? Thus, they endured and didn't say anything, pretending that they didn't see the two idiots. Everyone was still thinking about the bet just now. This seemed like a bet that they would definitely win, but after the other party brought it up, they started to discuss it cautiously, as if it was another huge trap. You guys don't even dare to do this? Han family young master asked. It was a very common method of provocation, but it depended on who was using it. When it came to Han family young master, that expression, that tone, and even the corner of his mouth, it made people feel like they were being looked down on and looked down on. If they didn't agree, they wouldn't be men. Some of the presidents who were weaker in this area wanted to agree. Luckily, there were 26 of them. The three who were holding the alcohol weren't able to stop them, but this time, they were able to stop them in time. Let's discuss it properly, Han family young master said. The presidents were very obedient and seriously discussed it. You all came from afar to regain your face. You have already dilly-dallied outside the clock tower for half a day. And now you want to continue dilly-dally over a small bet. How long are you all planning to embarrass yourselves for? Fuck, what did you say? The presidents were instantly enraged. Some of them had already picked up their weapons. Han family young master didn't panic. Don't attack, that is pointless. I gave you many of those teleportation scrolls. The presidents immediately understood what he meant. As long as they sent a message, they would be able to teleport in with enough people. The ones who would die would be them. No wonder they weren't afraid even though they had fewer people, they had such a trump card. What is your goal for this bet? A president couldn't help but ask. To watch a flying man. Han family young master said. The presidents were speechless. What kind of reason was that? Are you going to bet or not? If not, then just jump. Han family young master said. What? Do I have to call people to throw it? Han family young master said. Fuck, are you threatening us? Bosses, use your brains. If you aren't going to bet, then why are you all still here? Of course you all have to go out. If you want to go out, then what if you don't jump? The presidents came back to their senses. The clock tower was blocked, and there was no way out. They didn't bring any scrolls, so they could only jump if they wanted to go out. We can go to a lower place to jump. A president was very smart. And flying men. Han family young master said. A bunch of flying men. Han family young master said. The presidents wiped off their sweat. They could already foresee that if they really jumped, then the story of the 26 flying men would be on the forum headlines tomorrow. Although the 26,000 spectators were all on the same side, they didn't care if they were close or not. Okay. We will bet with you. Let's see what tricks you all have up your sleeves. The presidents discussed for a while and finally agreed. They didn't have a choice. If they didn't agree, then they would die. If they didn't agree, then they would be flying men. What was more annoying was what would they do after they left? Continue to be surrounded by the 26,000 people here? Although the other party's bet was suspicious, it could at least let things continue to develop. No matter what changes there were, it was better than the current stalemate. At least everyone had something to do. Butterfly knot. Come out and watch the flying men. Chapter 953. From start to finish, the 26 guilds that were charging towards Cloud City hadn't taken the initiative to attack. From being led into the city by the Imperial Divine Cry, to being trapped in the tower, to being despised outside the tower, to being forced into the tower, to accepting the wager now, all of it was because he had no choice but to accept it. They were all guild leaders, so it was natural for them to be suppressed like this. After agreeing to the bet, one of the guild leaders said, "It's too lonely to fly alone. Why don't we do it this way? Whoever loses, everyone will fly down." This was to seize the initiative and suppress the other party. This was also the result of their discussion. Although they were very suspicious of the other party's conspiracy, the guild leaders still felt that they were in an invincible position in this bet, so they did not hesitate to increase the stakes. If the very overpowered player retreated, the guild leaders would be very happy, who knew that the other party did not even think about it, and casually agreed with a okay. The guild leaders who were originally quite confident, but when they saw the other party's nonchalant look, their hearts could not help but beat a small drum. While the guild leaders were bewildered, they made arrangements for the guild. The main point was to temporarily wait outside the tower, not to move, and not to cause trouble. Even if someone tried to cause trouble, it would be fine as long as they were repelled, especially not to start a conflict with the players of Cloud City. This was announced to all guild members. Then, the guild leaders each privately chatted with their core confidants, explaining the details of the situation, and left the outside matters to them to make arrangements. After everything was arranged, the guild leaders breathed a sigh of relief. What should they do next? The very overpowered player did not speak, and no one paid attention to them. There was even a group of people who gathered to play poker. In the beginning, there were only 3 people playing landlord, but in the end, it became 3 families with 6 people. Halfway through, there were even people who suddenly got up to say that they had something to do, and then left. Everything was so calm and natural, as if they were not surrounded by 26,000 strong players. Those who wanted to play, those who wanted to laugh, and those who wanted to look for girls continued to lean against the window to look for beauties. The guild leaders were bored. What were they doing? Some people subconsciously looked at the pile of alcohol at the stairs. Previously, they insisted on not accepting the enemy's sugar-coated bullets, but now they wanted to take the initiative to attack the sugar-coated bullets. Just like that, they did not know how long they had to endure. From loneliness, boredom, and worry, the guild leaders gradually became a little excited. Why? It was getting closer and closer to the appointed time. The presidents weren't fools. Of course, they would make an appointment. Otherwise, wouldn't there be no end to this? Did they really have to wait for their guild members to cause trouble? Wouldn't that mean that they had no chance of winning? At this time, there were only 10 minutes left before the bet ended. From the reports from the various guilds, everything was calm. There were no surprises. The players who had gathered in Cloud City to watch the game had also dispersed due to boredom. Only the 26,000 players from the 26 guilds were still gathered there like idiots. Everyone hold on a little longer. It will be over soon. The various guild leaders comforted the crowd. They were also waiting, and they knew how difficult it was. 1 point, 2 points, 3 points. For the rest of the time, every minute that passed made the guild leaders feel very satisfied. They felt more and more like they could see the flying man perform. They began to size up the group of people who were very heaven-defying, thinking about what each of them would look like when they flew down. Suddenly, someone realized that a very heaven-defying person had left just now. Wouldn't it mean that they wouldn't need to fly if they left? This was against the rules. That was what everyone was thinking, but they actually allowed that person to leave without stopping him. This has to be made clear. Don't tell me these guys are trying to take advantage of this loophole and wait until the time is almost up to see if anything happens, and they all leave first. A guild leader said. All the other guild leaders expressed their agreement. Just as they were about to speak, the Han family young master who had been leaning against the window and drinking suddenly sneered and said, "Finally can't sit still anymore?" Then he looked over at them. For some reason, at this moment, all the guild leaders felt an inexplicable shock in their hearts. A feeling of being schemed against uncontrollably slid into their hearts. One of them had already blurted out, "What can't sit still anymore?" Just a moment ago, news of your guild members committing murder and arson came from a few streets in Cloud City. The Han family young master was full of smiles as he spoke alarmingly. Murder was one thing, but how could they set fire in the game? Do you want to burn down the main city? Did they really think that the system didn't exist? Impossible. The 26 guild leaders practically spoke in unison. They were constantly in contact with their guilds. Their brothers and sisters were doing their best to fulfill their duties. During this boring wait, not a single person from any guild left. That's the truth, the Han family young master said. The truth isn't up to you to make up. Our guild members are clearly below. A guild leader said. You're saying that our people are committing murder and arson. What evidence do you have? Another guild leader said. This evidence isn't easy to obtain. Why don't you send someone to take a look? The Han family young master said. The guild leaders looked at each other. Someone laughed coldly. Do you think we'll fall for this? We can choose a few people from each side of the tower to personally investigate. The Han family young master said. When the guild leaders heard this, they felt that this method was feasible. Thus, they randomly picked 2 out of the 26 people. They were both archers with good eyesight. On the side of Against the Heavens, the ones who stood out were Sword Demon and Brother Yu. The 4 of them will go take a look. Is that okay? The Han family young master said. After the guild leaders nodded, Brother Yu took out a teleportation scroll, and the 4 of them entered the teleportation circle. When the teleportation scroll came out, they were naturally in the Cloud City outside the tower. The 2 guild leaders immediately looked around. In the end, this was just a normal market. There was nothing out of the ordinary. The 2 of them searched while asking, where? This way. Brother Yu led the way. The Sword Demon didn't say a word. One of the 2 found the Sword Demon and said, Boss Sword Demon. The Sword Demon smiled and nodded. That person also smiled. Long time no see. That's right. You're still as famous as ever. You're not bad either. Haha, Against the Heavens, you're awesome no matter where you go. Brother Yu and the other guild leader looked at the 2 of them in surprise. So they knew each other. Brother Yu couldn't help but be impressed. As expected of the Sword Demon, he also knew the guild leaders. It was just that he kept a low profile and didn't make it public. Compared to himself, Brother Yu only felt that it was very vulgar. This time there's no right or wrong. You know, the guild leader said to the Sword Demon. You probably don't know how much we've been despised. I know. The Sword Demon said. You know. If I knew that guild was yours, I would have warned you, the Sword Demon said. Warn me about what? The guild leader was startled. There's a hidden meaning to this. The Sword Demon smiled. The guild leader scratched his head, clearly not understanding. The other guild leader also had a face of suspicion. It looks like a natural conflict between the players, but in reality, someone has been instigating it from behind. The Sword Demon said. You're talking about Ing Chi's studio? No one thought that the other guild leader would say it out loud. The Sword Demon and Brother Yu both looked towards him. If someone was instigating it from behind, the answer isn't hard to guess, right? The guild leader shrugged. From the start, it was Ing Chi who hired these experts to do things, causing the situation to develop. The answer wasn't hard to guess. You suspected it from the start? Brother Yu asked this brother. The brother nodded. And I'm not the only one who thinks this way. But so what? We have no choice, even if we know that we're being schemed against. In the game, if you want to break up a guild, force is the most direct way, but it's never the most effective. The most terrifying thing is actually rumors and slander. If the people's hearts scatter, then the guild will collapse. So you guys have to fight this battle? Brother Yu said. The brother nodded. Divert attention, quell rumors, shut people's mouths, and strengthen the cohesion of the guild. But if the studio wants to cause trouble, they can still continue to instigate and fabricate other rumors. Brother Yu said. How can there be waves without wind? The brother laughed. Brother Yu understood what he meant. For example, if their people weren't killed by defying Qi, even if the studio wanted to create rumors about them, they wouldn't be able to create such a big effect. What a talent! Brother Yu exclaimed in admiration. The Sword Demon and Defying Qi also expressed their admiration. You're welcome. The brother was humble. Since it's like this, we can't let the studio succeed no matter what. Sword Demon said. AI, it's easier said than done. The brother sighed. Brother Yu looked at the coordinates and suddenly said, we're almost there. Actually, what do you guys plan to do? The brother suddenly asked. Since everyone had communicated openly, he felt that it wasn't too much to ask this question. Lure the snake out of its hole. Sword Demon said. Who's the snake? Who else could it be? So now it's actually the studio's people pretending to be our guild to cause trouble in Cloud City? Talent. Brother, you continued to worship. But even if we know these things, we can't explain it clearly. We're new faces in Cloud City. With such a fierce attack, the players in Cloud City may have been hostile to us for a long time. So we're prepared. Sword Demon said. Oh, our bet is preparation. Sword Demon said. The people from our 26 guilds didn't move at all. The brothers' eyes lit up. But will the players in Cloud City believe us so easily? It may not be easy in other main cities, but Cloud City is different. There are experts with high enough reputation here. Qianli drunk. This time, it was finally the brothers' turn to worship. Sword Demon and Brother Yu suddenly felt very proud to have such a friend. What about Qianli drunk? He's not online. The two were speechless. Such a big thing happened and he's not online? The two guild leaders stared with wide eyes. Sword Demon and Brother Yu were silent. At this moment, they felt that having such a friend, their emotions were complicated. Chapter 954. They finally arrived at the place Brother Yu led. The discussion about Qianli's drunkenness stopped for the time being. Brother Yu pointed in a certain direction and said, "It's probably that team, right?" In that direction, there was a team of players strutting around on the street. The studio wanted to stir up a storm in the city, but they couldn't just kill wherever they went. The problem of PK value had to be considered. They didn't dare to kill more than 30 to provoke the system god. In fact, many players didn't even dare to kill more than 20. It would be troublesome if they encountered a system guard or something like that. Therefore, the puppet army sent by the studio spent most of their time wandering around, taking the initiative to find trouble and cause trouble in crowded places. There was no point in finding a deserted street and killing people, right? At this time, this street was a block with no people. This team was actually not interested in the sporadic passing players and moved forward with a purpose. This made it convenient for Sword Demon and the others. The four of them casually moved forward. The two Archer Guild leaders didn't grow eagle eyes for nothing. One step ahead of Sword Demon and Brother Yu, they clearly saw the team's guild badge. They didn't know people from other guilds, but they knew each other's badges. After the two guild leaders looked at each other, the team had already approached and passed by the four of them. They're pretending to be the drunken battlefield guild of your 26 guilds, right? Brother Yu said. Both of them nodded their heads. Let's follow them from afar and see what they want to do, Brother Yu suggested. It would be too obvious to turn around and follow them, so the four of them went into an alley on the side. Sword Demon and Brother Yu, the two natives of Cloud City, were naturally very familiar with the layout of Cloud City's main city. At this time, they led the way, preparing to circle around and then appear behind the team. After a small circle, they were a little far from the team, but at least they could still see them. Brother Yu looked in the direction and said to the Sword Demon, "Looking at the direction, they're probably going to the tavern?" "It should be." Sword Demon nodded. There were many taverns in a main city, and every tavern had many players resting in it. If you wanted to cause trouble, you couldn't miss out on such a place. The four of them sped up to catch up. From afar, they could see that the group of people had indeed entered the tavern. Before the four of them reached the tavern, Brother Yu had already received the news. "It's already started." "How did you receive so much information?" The president of that generation couldn't help but ask. "The players of all the guilds in Cloud City can be said to be our eyes. Everyone takes turns passing on information, and it will eventually reach us. As for places like taverns, there were people who arranged for us from the very beginning. If you want to cause trouble to attract attention, these are the best places to do it," Brother Yu explained. "So that's how it is." The person nodded. As they spoke, they had already approached the tavern. They seemed to have heard the sounds of fighting inside. Not long after, the door was pushed open, and the group of people had already flashed out. They weren't running away, but arrogantly called out to the players in the tavern to come out and fight again. The players in the tavern were already scared out of their wits. A group of people flashed out and fought with the other party at the entrance of the tavern. After a few blows, half of them were killed. At this time, the spectators in the tavern hadn't even all left yet. This group of people is very strong. The eyes of the two presidents were naturally very sharp. Their equipment isn't simple. The four of them walked closer. They were already in the range of appraisal. Brother Yu had already started to examine them. Damn, they're all exquisite. Brother Yu was shocked as he appraised. The two presidents were also examining the equipment of this group of people. They were indeed quite extraordinary. If not, how could they bully the players who weren't that far apart in level? Sword Demon was very angry. He pulled off the mask that was hanging on his neck and equipped his head. Then he held his dagger and rushed forward. Before Brother Yu could stop him, Sword Demon had already disappeared. He immediately used his ultimate skill, Misty Ambush. Hahaha, I knew it. Brother Yu, Sword Demon's old subordinate, old comrade, and also the first president's sharpshooter, didn't hesitate. He took out his bow from his pocket and shot an arrow. Man, a real man. The talent president also took out his weapon. This way, Brother Yu, who initially wanted to stop Sword Demon, didn't seem very manly. Brother Yu explained gloomily, I'm not trying to stop him. I mean, at least wait until I'm in my state. Just give it to us, and then you can run first. The two guild leaders laughed, and each of them released an arrow. Why are we running? Brother Yu asked as he buffed the two of them. This group of people isn't simple. We can probably sneak attack and kill one or two of them. After that, we have to run. The three of us are fine. If you don't run first, you're dead. Brother Yu didn't hesitate. He didn't have a sense of presence when his teammates showed off their strength. He was already used to it. He immediately retreated and shouted, Then I'll wait for you in front. Go, go. The two archers waved their hands. On the other side, Sword Demon had already rushed into the enemy's formation. With just one slash, his valiant figure had already attracted the attention of the team. Everyone turned their heads to look. The two archer presidents' quick arrows had already flown over and firmly hit the player who was stabbed by Sword Demon. The two presidents' damage was obviously not bad. Sword Demon's target naturally wasn't those who had thick skin and could endure being killed. With an abnormal fog ambush and the sharp sniping of the two presidents, the player who was attacked had already died before he could be rescued. Cool. The group of players who were being bullied cried out. They had already realized that they were no match for their opponent. However, the battle had already reached a point where they couldn't escape even if they wanted to. Who knew that a savior would suddenly appear and kill an enemy that they were completely no match for? Everyone's spirits were lifted. What are you looking at? Let's go together and destroy this group of troublemakers. Sword Demon roared at the Cloud City players who were watching the show. These players who had come out of the tavern had already seen how this group of people came in looking for trouble. At this moment, Sword Demon's bold and unrestrained actions instantly ignited many people's fighting spirit. Do it! Half of the spectators immediately gave up on being numb. Whether they were high-level or low-level, experts or noobs, they took out their weapons and threw their most convenient skills at the group of people. It had to be said that this group of people was worthy of being the studio's elite fighters. At this moment, after being fully armed, there was no sign of chaos even though they were outnumbered. In fact, before they came to this task, they were already mentally prepared for this kind of situation. Who knew where they would incite a player uprising? Fuck awesome, too awesome. The two presidents saw that Sword Demon had instantly incited the spectators, and their spirits were lifted as well. Whoosh 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 whoosh, they continued to release cold arrows. Don't panic. Warriors, cover the mages. Focus fire. Archers, pay attention to focus fire. Priests, give me 2 priests to heal me. Bandits, don't talk if you're in stealth mode. People will hear you. Melee fighters, take turns to attack. Don't fight. If your health is low, retreat. Sword Demon fought while commanding these ragtag troops to fight to the death with the puppet army. Both sides fought back and forth in front of the tavern. After all, the strength of the side of Cloud City was limited. They weren't as well equipped and coordinated as the puppet army. In the fierce battle, There were constantly people falling under the white light. However, this battle was obviously no longer a battle that belonged to one person. The players who stood up first fell. And soon new players who were provoked to fight rushed up. Under the call of Sword Demon, this was a rare battle where there were no spectators because all the spectators would soon become participants in the battle. Gradually, the puppet soldiers began to feel afraid. At this time, it wasn't just the players who were provoked in the tavern. Those who passed by on the street and stopped to watch would quickly throw their weapons into the battle. At first, the puppet army was worried that if they continued fighting like this, their PK value would rise to 30 and they would be crushed by the system guards. However, it seemed like they didn't have that chance anymore. Attacks came from all directions, and they gradually felt that they couldn't take care of them all. The faces of the priests in the team became darker and darker. Priests were the most aware of the pressure of the battle. The busier the priests were, the more disadvantageous the situation was. The two priests in the team took turns to control and recover the damage, so that one of them would always have time to recover their mana. However, facing more and more attacks, the two of them couldn't take care of each other even if they worked together. We can't take it anymore. We have to retreat. We can't hold on any longer, the two priests said hurriedly. If this continued, they would definitely die if they ran out of mana. It seems like it's too late. The face of the leader of the team was ashen. Everyone looked around and couldn't find a way out at all. It was full of people. Quick, drop your equipment. Someone suddenly reminded. Everyone came to a realization. Now that they were all wearing exquisite equipment and had PK value, if they fell, their equipment would definitely drop. With this thought, everyone stopped resisting and started to put their equipment into their pockets in unison. Fuck. The players who were in the midst of killing saw their opponents suddenly doing this, and they immediately looked down on them. Useless. Too useless. Now you know fear. Do it. Don't let them take the equipment. All sorts of shouts were mixed in. Sword Demon didn't need to make any noise at this time. Even if he shouted, no one would listen. The players surged forward and instantly slashed the people who were looting their equipment into white light. These people were already very efficient in collecting the equipment, but there were still a few pieces of equipment. Moreover, with so many people surrounding them, the attacks never stopped. A few people died before they could remove all the equipment. The equipment dropped all over the ground, but miraculously, no one went to pick it up. The players on the front line looked at each other and suddenly cheered. Awesome, this is awesome. Kill this bunch of trash. The players cheered. After shouting for a few seconds, someone finally shouted, "Pick up the equipment." The scene instantly became chaotic again. Sword Demon awkwardly squeezed out of the sea of people, but his face was full of an excited smile. Chapter 955. Outside the crowd, the two Archer Guild leaders also gave a thumbs up to Sword Demon. Both of them admired Sword Demon very much. Some people were born with the temperament of a boss. Even if they were usually quiet and inconspicuous, they would be able to attract attention as long as they stood out when needed. They would be able to make people involuntarily listen to them and follow their orders. What kind of aura was this? No one could say for sure, but according to his old friend Sword Ghost, this was the temperament that he had unconsciously cultivated after being the boss of countless online games. Brother, you had already rushed back at this time. He didn't run but found a place to hide. In the end, he also witnessed the scene of Sword Demon launching the People's War and forcibly surrounding the team of strong players. Brother Yu's blood was boiling just by watching, and at this time, he ran back with a thumbs up. Bull. Giant bull. Other than this word, the three guys couldn't find another more appropriate adjective. Let's not talk anymore. Call people and get rid of this bunch of trash. At this time, the guild leader recalled the scene of Sword Demon commanding the players to destroy the team. His heart itched, and he wanted to immediately bring his brothers to do the same. No, you guys can't move. Sword Demon said. Why? If you guys move, it will be chaotic and it will be hard to distinguish between friend and foe. Not to mention our Cloud City players. I think even if your 26 guilds had such a group of people mixed in, you guys wouldn't be able to tell the real from the fake, right? Sword Demon said. Is there any accurate information that impersonates our two guilds? We want to see it with our own eyes. Sword Demon's old comrade said at this time. Of course. Brother Yu looked at the information and waved his hand. Over here. News of the annihilation of a group of puppet soldiers quickly reached the ears of the bosses of the workshops. Naturally, the boss of the puppet army was livid and depressed, especially when he found out that they had lost a lot of equipment due to PvP when they died. He wanted to kick everyone he saw. Although this loss wasn't as tragic as Ing Chi's warehouse being robbed, it was still meat no matter how few flies there were. Moreover, they were all top-notch equipment. It was indeed a little painful. All the bosses asked about the battle situation in detail, and learned that a large group of players had ganged up on them. All the bosses thought that their provocation was too aggressive, so much so that they angered the public. But then they heard the news that someone suspected to be the Sword Demon had appeared. Sword Demon's eye-catching performance at the time was noticed by everyone present. The puppet army would not have come to the conclusion that the Sword Demon was the thief that they saw. However, the damage from the Sword Demon's misty ambush was too outstanding. The puppet army did not dare to believe that the thief was the Sword Demon. The information that the puppet army sent back said that it was the Sword Demon, but they did not dare to confirm it. In the end, this news made all the bosses excited. In their eyes, it was very overpowered. They had already begun to incite the players of Sword Demon to fight back. This was a very good sign. All teams should be more cautious. Since the opponent has begun to consciously fight back, although our teams are elites, it will still be difficult to deal with them. Don't pick places that are too eye-catching, Matchless Wonder said. All the bosses nodded and made adjustments to their strategies. The purpose of picking places with a lot of people to cause trouble was to make the players of Cloud City react quickly. Now it seemed that the effect was achieved. The fire had been successfully lit. Next, it was time for the real 26th Division to clash with the players of Cloud City. Their puppet army just needed to add fuel to the fire from time to time. Wuxia, isn't it time for your people to make a move? Matchless Wonder said. Nitrite was quite helpless. In fact, his side was much more difficult. Those people who caused trouble everywhere were bullying the civilians of Cloud City. If they were unlucky enough to run into the Sword Demon, they would be able to organize an effective resistance. As for his side, if he wanted to provoke them, he would have to go to the 26th Guild. They had 26,000 combat troops ready at any time. His team was very overpowered, and this mission was very likely to end in his death. Matchless Wonder purposely gave him such a task, but Nitrite had no choice but to accept it. It could be said that he was being played. Outside the clock tower, the players of the 26th Guild were still quietly waiting for orders. Suddenly, the players discovered that there were very sneaky players appearing in a certain alley. The players who had been lonely for a long time were not angry. They excitedly wanted to catch them, but they were stopped by the guild leaders. The core person who maintained the situation quickly reported the situation to the guild leaders who were still in the clock tower. What were the guild leaders doing? They had just received news from the two guild leaders who went out to see what was going on. They were in a tense discussion. Many of the guild leaders were willing to accept the idea that the studios were playing tricks. But at this moment, were these guys pretending to be the studios using this as a pretext? Or were they using a very overpowered method to incite the players of Cloud City to resist them? The guild leaders were still discussing incessantly. Even when they heard that the opponents had been annihilated by the Sword Demon's Cloud City players, they still suspected that this might be an act. They started to lure us here, then lure us into the clock tower, and find an excuse to stall for time. Then they used this method to mobilize all the players of Cloud City to surround us here? A terrifying conspiracy that sounded quite frightening was discussed by the guild leaders. At this moment, someone outside the clock tower reported that there were sneaky players with bad intentions nearby. There was already a guild leader who stood up and wanted to take out his weapon and fight to the death with these very overpowered people. In the end, it was Han family young master who glanced at this person in surprise. What's the situation? We've already seen through your trick of injuring yourself to gain confidence. This person laughed coldly. Are you crazy? Are you nervous because you know you're going to be a flying man? Han family young master said. Fuck. This guild leader's warrior was about to charge over. A warrior beside the young master of the Han clan immediately moved to block as well. The two of them collided, and both of them were forced back several steps. The two sides immediately entered a state of battle. In the narrow space inside the tower, both sides had already set up their respective formations. The battle was about to break out at any moment. Han family young master's voice was the first to be heard. Speak clearly before you make your move. Don't listen to his nonsense, it's all to stall for time. A mage on the guild leader's side raised his hand and blasted down a spell. The space inside the clock tower was small. This spell only had half of the effect. Half of it was on the overpowered people, and the other half was on the wall. No matter how strong the overpowered people were, space was limited. If they wanted to dodge this spell, they would have to jump off the building. In the flames, Han family young master cast a few healing spells on Yutian Shunming, and the others who had low health. Those who were attacked looked at their health. The guild leader of a big guild was indeed extraordinary. With this kind of attack power, other than Qianli drunk, there was probably no other mage in Cloud City that was as strong. After this attack, words didn't need to be said. The space inside the tower was small. The front line of melee classes had already collided with each other when they took 2 steps forward. Ping ping pang pang pang. Classes like thieves had all become warriors. What was there to sneak around? In such a small place, there was no space for people to take a detour and ambush. Archers were even more pitiful. There was no space to shoot at all. Even mages had to be careful. The space was narrow. If they didn't throw their spells accurately, they would hit their own people. As for single target spells, apart from lightning spells that fell from the sky, other spells were the same as archers. There was no space to fly. Both sides had a lot of people who didn't have a place to use their skills. The damage output of the battle was greatly limited. This fight didn't have any technical content. It was like pushing a wall. The 2 rows of melee classes in the middle were fighting. The blazing cloak was very powerful at this moment. His fire beacon city skill was something that even the enemy guild leader didn't know. After he threw it out twice, the 2 rows of fire walls roasted the guild leaders. They couldn't even dodge. There was no coordination, no tactics, and no technique in this battle. It was just a battle of attrition. Whoever could last longer would be closer to victory. In this kind of situation, priests were obviously very important. There were naturally priests among the guild leaders, but they couldn't do much at this moment because the fire tree thousand layers flames kept burning under their feet. This spell was continuously losing health. Priests' healing spells were the same as mages' spells. They could be interrupted by attacks, so they were greatly affected. Even so, the guild leaders felt that they had more people. In the end, they should be the ones to last until the end. The other side didn't teleport any reinforcements. It seemed like they didn't make any arrangements in this area. Just as they were feeling proud, they suddenly realized that the melee class experts in front of them were flashing with white light. They were clearly being healed by the priests. Their healing wasn't good, but the other side's healing was so smooth. The guild leaders who were fighting panicked. They looked behind them and spat out a mouthful of blood. The 3 priests in the enemy's formation were all sitting by the window under the leadership of the Han family's young master. Their feet were not touching the ground, and the 1,000 layers of flame could not burn them at all. How could their healing spells not be smooth? The guild leaders looked back again. There was no such terrain behind them. Their special choice was to roll down the stairs. The guild leaders couldn't help but spit out blood. The other side's priests were sitting comfortably in the window. They were probably prepared for this, right? No wonder they didn't call for help. They had the confidence to win. Many guild leaders regretted making a move so hastily. It seemed like they were going to die for sure. But on second thought, if they didn't make a move now, the other side's plot would be carried out. They would also die in the clock tower. Wouldn't it be the same if they died earlier or later? Once they thought of this, the guild leaders' hearts suddenly relaxed, and each of them took on the stance of risking their lives. In the end, he heard the young master of the Han clan, who was sitting leisurely in the window, say, "If you really want to die so badly, then die. Leave a few alive. Leave a few alive to play with the flying man. The guild leaders heard this. There was a hidden meaning in this. There seemed to be a pause. Suddenly someone shouted, "All of you stop." The guild leaders all stopped. Even if they took a few hits for nothing, they wouldn't die immediately. They were all experts with high attack and endurance. Chapter 956. After all, the guild leaders were unfamiliar with each other. This caused them to have a lack of teamwork. They could talk things out, but this was a battle that was constantly changing. They really didn't have the time. At this time, everyone stopped fighting in unison, but after they stopped, their reactions were different. For example, some of the priest guild leaders didn't move, while others took the opportunity when the enemy's mage stopped attacking to heal. "Don't move, don't move. That damn priest, I'm talking to you, you're still healing." Han family young master pointed at someone and shouted, "You haven't had enough, right? Do you still want to continue?" As he said that, Han family young master's hands were also furiously healing. This couldn't be helped. If the enemy didn't heal you and the enemy suddenly attacked again, you would be at a disadvantage. Both sides looked at each other. This was like pulling one hair and the whole body would be affected. In the blink of an eye, it seemed like they were going to fight again. At this moment, someone among the guild leaders shouted, "Everyone stop, stop. Everyone look at the message. There's a new situation." Some of the guild leaders were preparing to fight. Some were working hard to heal. And the one who didn't stop after being scolded by Han family young master, and instead encouraged the other priest guild leaders to work harder, were all stunned. They all opened the team channel that their guild leaders had set up. The new situation was sent back by the frontline members of the dispatch tower. These two guild leaders, one was called Zhao Yin, an old friend of Sword Demon. The other was called Cloud Rising Mountain, the calm and objective guild leader. The message was sent by Cloud Rising Mountain. According to Zhao Yin's instructions, "Brother, you asked about the location of their guilds." In the end, Cloud Rising Mountain's guild was slightly closer, so he headed over there. Cloud Rising Mountain's guild had the same name as him, and was also called Cloud Rising Mountain. The puppet army that was disguised as them had already followed the orders of the higher-ups, and found a secluded street. They didn't notice that their whereabouts were being noticed, and no one followed them along the way. Of course, they wouldn't be followed, because there was no need to. Almost all of the guild players in Cloud Peak City were incredibly overpowered informants. Wherever they went, no one was following them. This was because the players next to them were reporting their whereabouts to their guild leaders. Their guild leaders also had their own channels to inform others about this. It was incredibly overpowered. The four of them accurately came to the door. This area was quite remote, and there were very few players passing by. This time, they didn't dare to provoke this group of people. The four of them pretended to be players passing by and casually walked forward. As they drew closer and closer, Cloud Rising Mountains became more and more confused as he stared at this group of puppet soldiers. These people, what? They're just like the brothers in my guild. Since they were wearing the same equipment, their appearances weren't all that different. From afar, Cloud Rising Faraway Mountains could tell that this group of players looked like his guild's trusted aides. When he got closer and used appraisal on them, he discovered that they were practically replicas. Aside from their appearances, they could pass off as real. Previously, the puppet soldiers weren't pretending to be Zhao Yin and Cloud Rising Mountain's guild, so they only thought that their equipment was good. However, now that Cloud Rising Mountains saw this group of people pretending to be his guild members, he could immediately tell that their equipment was good. At this moment, he quickly relayed the news to the other guild leaders in the team chat. This news came at the right time. If it wasn't for this information, there would have been another fight in the clock tower. Deliberately pretending to be their guild's experts was different from pretending to be their guild's experts, and pretending to be their guild's experts. Deliberately pretending to be their experts meant that they had to invest in them. There were 26 level 6 guilds here, so how could the equipment of their experts be cheap? Even if each guild only sent out 10 people, it would still be 260 sets of top-tier equipment. Even a player with money wouldn't go so far. Moreover, with so many different top-tier equipment, it would take a lot of effort and time to collect them all. Even if you had money, you might not be able to do it. Even if a workshop had it, it was still a rare commodity. It wasn't something that could be sold with money. For a workshop, these two steps couldn't be any easier. The equipment was in their inventory, so taking it out for temporary use was a small matter. This time, the various guild leaders finally dispelled their suspicions. This wasn't a deliberate misdirection, and the previous annihilation of a team wasn't a ruse. This was indeed the work of the workshop behind the scenes, trying to provoke a conflict between the 26 guilds and the players of Cloud City. Han family young master and the others had naturally received the news. Seeing that the other guild leaders had no intention of fighting, they naturally wouldn't take the initiative to attack. What are those people from the workshop trying to do? One guild leader couldn't help but roar. They had a faint feeling that they were being manipulated from behind the scenes. This feeling was very unpleasant. Where are these imposters hiding? Drag them out and take care of them. Another guild leader shouted. After saying this, the other guild leaders looked towards against the heavens. Clearly, they knew the movements of these people. Leave the matter of these imposters to us. What all of you need to do is make sure your subordinates don't run around. At a time like this, most of you probably can't even tell the difference between the real and the fake. Han family young master finally jumped out from the window and said, "As for the bet just now." Han family young master's sudden mention of this shocked the other guild leaders. However, someone quickly reacted and said, "We didn't lose the bet. Those guys are imposters. They aren't from our guild. Our people are all here." "Oh, so Zhao Yin and Cloud Rising Mountain aren't people?" Han family young master asked. "Fuck, that counts." The other guild leaders wanted to vomit blood. "Oh, doesn't count? Then it doesn't count. Guild leaders, please keep your subordinates in check. Leave the rest to us," Han family young master said. Then Against the Heavens took out their scrolls. In a group of 4, they quickly ran out of scrolls. That guy didn't take the bet seriously? The guild leaders were in disbelief. Although it was their first time meeting him, they had already seen how evil he was. They couldn't believe this was real. Although they understood the purpose of the bet, it was to stall for time, but it wasn't to deal with them. It was to make the people from the gaming studio take action. It was to let the guild leaders see the truth. Now the truth was clear. Due to the gorgeous cosplay, there was no other force in the game other than the gaming studio that had the ability to do such a thing. Compared to the reason why they were bought to deal with the heaven-defying incident, it was not difficult to see the role of the gaming studio in this matter. However, the problem was, even if they understood, the rumors in their main city wouldn't be quelled immediately. If they wanted to quell the rumors, they would have to get back at Against the Heavens. But now, the guild leaders were at a loss. Suddenly, another guild leader said with a miserable expression, "Brothers, how are we going to get out?" "Get out? Ah. Fuck, how are we going to get out?" The guild leaders were going crazy. Weren't they trapped in the clock tower? Looking from the inside, there were countless layers of stones blocking the door. It seemed like Against the Heavens had spent most of his time collecting these stones to decorate the clock tower. At this time, the flying man was their only choice to get out of the tower. "Flying?" someone asked. "Flying 6. Someone raged. "That bastard." The guild leaders wanted to cry. When the Han family's young master and the others teleported out of the city, they gathered in one place, which was the central plaza of Cloud City. Quite a few players had been waiting for them there, led by Unsworn Sword. This was Cloud City's elite guild. Seeing that the Han clan's young master and the others had arrived, Unsworn Sword quickly came forward and asked directly, "Can we make our move now?" "You're in a hurry?" Han family young master laughed. "Ehe." Sword Without Oath's eyes were filled with greed. "You're lucky this time. You'll have to kill many bosses to get the equipment yourself," Han family young master said. "Ha ha ha, I'm going to rip them all off this time." Sword Without Oath laughed. Not far behind Sword of No Oath, the Han family's young master saw a person. He was once a high-spirited guild leader, but his old leader went against the flow and stood there, looking a little uneasy. Guild leader against the current. Han family young master, who had always been arrogant, actually took the initiative to greet someone. After that war, against the current's days weren't good. The guild that was once in the limelight collapsed. More than half of their brothers were gone. They were depressed and had less time to play the game. There was no one to take care of wine when Songs and Black Alliance and Sheepcloud Guild were even worse off than Black Alliance and Sheepcloud Guild. Unsworn Sword, who used to grit his teeth whenever he saw him, was now sincerely addressing him as a brother. However, Upstream was not happy because of this, because he knew that in the eyes of Unsworn Sword, he was no longer a big shot who could compete with him. Unsworn Sword, against the current, was starting to hate this person more and more. However, although Against the Current had fallen, Sword Without Oaths unhindered wouldn't be able to take over Cloud City. Although the guild was small, in the hearts of Cloud City players, it was already the #1 guild in Cloud City. At the thought of this, Against the Heavens' ascension felt a little better. A lot of his dissatisfaction with Very Defiant had been diluted by Unsworn Sword and reigning the Four Seas. At this time, Han family young master, the person who made him so angry when he left, actually took the initiative to greet him when he was in such dire straits. Against the Current suddenly felt warmth in his heart. In terms of arrogance, this person was even more arrogant than Qianli. However, his attitude towards Against the Current wasn't like most people who fawned on the rich and powerful. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.